For people who are maybe unfamiliar with it, the best footballer of his generation, Jack McCaffrey, has decided to step away for this season at least, and perhaps, who knows, for a bit longer. It raises loads of different questions about the commitment level that is demanded of inter-county GAA players at the moment, and it also then opens up the conversation about how much does this one player bring Dublin back to the pool?
Well, on the first point, we don't know. There seem to be mixed reports in terms of whether Jack McCaffrey is stepping away because of work or just because he feels like he needs a break. Obviously, he's working as a doctor, and if we're talking about a championship in the middle of winter, I know he's spoken before about the demands he ends up having to place on people he works with in terms of getting time off, that maybe he just feels, considering the current crisis, he can't do that this winter. On the second point, it's himself, Fenton, Kilkenny, and Cluxton obviously are the four absolute keys for this Dublin side, but he's the one who excites the most. He's the one he is the ultimate big game player. Like, you look at his record down through the years, he's had such a stop-start career in many ways, from stepping away for a year, picking up injuries in 2 of the All-Ireland finals, but look at last year's first All-Ireland final. 1-3 from wing back.
Not bad.
And he is the guy, before every big match, you think, above all else, you have to watch. You have to watch, because he can win a game on his own. He's that John Giles going back to Nottingham Forest in 1980, talking about John Robertson being able to control a game from right midfield. Jack McCaffrey can control a game from wing back. He is the one that scares the living daylights out of the opposition. And for him to be missing for Dublin, and for Dessie Farrell to not be able to plan to have his experience there, it's a huge blow. Now, Owen Merchant could step in there maybe and do a very, very similar job.
It's not quite the same though, is it? Because you've got somebody who's been man of the match so often in so many of the big games, and has, imagine having those two issues. You've got Jack McCaffrey first wave, Owen Merchant second wave. Owen Merchant first wave, Jack McCaffrey second wave. It's a huge problem. We'll come back to this a little bit later on, but we would like to hear from the Dublin fans and from the supporters of other counties around the country. 087 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us. We didn't obviously get a chance properly to talk about what the fixtures and the reconstituted fixtures are going to mean for this year's championship. In many ways, Nathan, I think it also is the great leveller. We've seen how well Dublin play in the winter when they're not quite ready for championship action, and we know it's just the league for them, but those games when it has been absolutely pelting down has been more of a leveller than anything else that we've seen Dublin face over the last decade or so.
There's no guarantee it's going to be pelting down in November and December though. Climate change, Ger. Could be a nice mild winter, you never know.
Or we could have a bucket load of snow, a beast from the east.
This whole championship setup is totally unfair, isn't it? Towards the teams from Connacht and the teams from Ulster. Like Kerry and Dublin cruise through to an All-Ireland semi-final. Kerry, they have to beat Cork and one other team, and they're in an All-Ireland semi-final. Compare that to
Donegal.
Mayo will have to beat Roscommon and Galway. Donegal would have to beat Tyrone, Armagh and Monaghan just to reach an All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin.
Yeah, the provincial system.
Week after week after week. When you look at the amount of weeks there were, why couldn't they have had a Champions League style 32 team, 8 groups, everybody plays each other once, top teams go into a quarter-final, semi-final, final. Everybody gets a couple of games. Brilliant. But if you're a Leitrim footballer,
what's the point this year? Yeah.
You're playing Mayo first day out. What is the bloody point?
The honour of togging out for your county and being able to tell lads in 20 years' time that you marked such and such and got his jersey. And that seems to be it. And look, you would hope other sports have been taking this opportunity to kind of think, well, what do we do, and can we maybe reset here? And if we had to draw things up from the very start, would things change? And it turns out no is the answer. So look, we're going to come back to all these issues at 8 o'clock this morning. Again, we'd like to hear from you. 087 180 180 is the number. You're watching OTB AM. Here's what's coming up for you on the show this morning. We're going to bring you the sports news with Shane Hannon around about 8:05. Sports page is running through the headlines at around about 8:10 this morning. We'll get into that story and all the rest of the stuff that's happened over the course of the weekend as well. Football with Alan Smith. That is Smudger Smith, who of course was an Arsenal stalwart. We're going to talk to him about Theo Foley. We're going to talk to him about the situation at the club at the moment and everything that's happening in between. Today's Sporting Mount Rushmore is Clare. We're really looking forward to this. Keith Wood, who I suspect is a shoe-in to be on the mountain himself, is going to set the scene for us at around about 10 to 9 this morning. Then we're going to talk about the BMW Run and Ride for Pieta. Our cycling coach is Con Doherty. And Mount Rushmore of Clare is Jamesie O'Connor and Sil O'Connor are going to talk to us. I think Jamesie has a good shout of being on it, given that he was essentially the best forward in the country for the 2 years that they won their first 2 All-Irelands. And for me, Nathan, the big thing here is the team that gets something done the first time is the most important team, because they're the trailblazers. Everybody else is standing on the shoulders of giants.
So you're putting Jamesie ahead of, say, Tony Kelly because of that?
I think so. I actually like. I do think that is hugely important, because there's no second wave if the first wave doesn't happen.
You're obsessed with this first and second wave. You've been doing a lot of reading about the pandemic and panicking about what's coming this winter, I fear. And it's just going to drip feed into your sports commentary for the foreseeable. Yeah, listen, and also that first team was so iconic. This is going to be an interesting one, because as you touch on, you have the rugby side with Keith Wood and Axel Foley. And then you're into Jamesie, Brian Lohan.
Davey.
Gerlach Nan has to be there. And Davey. Davey gets
in on
Davey
both.
a little bit later, and he gets in on, he gets in on both. And also, I keep coming back to what Mount Rushmore should be. You look at it and it sums up a county, and Davey sums up Clare. They may not want him to, but Davey sums up Clare.
On that note, it's 7:37 a.m. this morning. We'll be back for that debate over the course of the rest of the morning. Use the hashtag OTB AM to get involved. You can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number. First, let's bring you some of the pay-per-view yesterday. Maura Trassan-Kelly and Brendan O'Brien joined Joe for the pay-per-view. Have a look.
This started rumbling last night, Maura Trassan-Kelly. He is just about as revered, respected, liked player as there is in GAA for his demeanour, for his skills on the pitch, his speed, his general approach to life, I think. So, I mean, you wish him well, but when I saw that news last night, I'll admit, I thought, well, the picture will be a touch less colourful without Jack McCaffrey involved.
Definitely. Not only does he bring great football to the field and great character and charisma and everything else, but it's his off-the-field stuff that I think has him as revered as he is, because he's not afraid to show his personality, as we've seen from that night a few years ago after the All-Ireland final. He's not afraid to have a laugh. He's not afraid to give his opinion. He's respectful. He's polite. He is a good role model, you would argue. And the fact that he's gone, or looks like he's going to be gone, indeed will be a loss. But I suppose if any team can survive without a Jack McCaffrey, it's going to be Dublin. But, he's not, he's one of those people who nearly would be in the replaceable category. Man of the match, too. In 2 successful All-Ireland finals. I think he scored, was it 1-3 in the drawn final last year? Mm-hmm. You can't just replace that, even if you are Dublin, But I think he's the epitome. When you talk about, sports psychology, there's a concept called athletic identity, which is how much an athlete or a person identifies as being an athlete. And if you identify too much of that, all of a sudden you leave the rest of your life behind, and all of a sudden you're Jack McCaffrey, the athlete. But no, he's done it the right way. He is Jack McCaffrey, who also happens to play football. And perhaps he's now decided, you know what, I've played enough football for a while, I want to do other things. And I mean, what has he got left to achieve? That's the other question. It's not like other players who are retiring, wondering what's going to come next. He's done it all.
He'll be 27 in October, Brendan. His father, Noel, also represented Dublin. Just reading Dermot Crowe's piece here. Won his first All-Ireland as a senior in 2013. Won it again in 14, 15. Took a year out. He returned in 17, but then went off in 16, travelling and working with goal. 5 All-Irelands, 3 league titles, 2 All-Ireland under-21s, 3 All-Stars, Footballer of the Year, as Marie said as well. Successive man of the matches in All-Ireland finals. Just a Rolls-Royce player. What's not clear, though, across the pages is, one, his reasoning, his exact reasoning. Some saying it may be the commitments. I'm sure he's got a very demanding job. It may be his commitments to work. Others are saying it's nothing to do with work and he just wants to take time off. And then secondly, we're not sure, and maybe he's not sure, but certainly we're not sure if this is, I'm taking 2020 off, or if actually at the age of 27, I've had a really good time and I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. And the only guarantee we have for now, even if Jack McCaffrey comes out and says, lads, that's it, I'm never coming back to inter-county football again. If he keeps playing his club football, and if people are still seeing Jack McCaffrey bomb up the wing for his club in Dublin, the questions will always be asked. If it's Desi Farrell or another manager down the line, like, think about his age again. He's either 27 or turning 27. And you look at previous years when Dermot Connolly was in and out of the panel, and Jim Gavin was still doing his kind of bi-weekly or bi-monthly press conferences at an ungodly hour in the Gibson Hotel. One of the constant questions was, what's the story of Dermot Connolly? Is Dermot Connolly coming back? Jim Gavin was always very upfront about the panel being open-ended. And with Jack McCaffrey being the age he is, we could be facing 4 or 5 years of, is Jack McCaffrey coming back? Did you see Jack McCaffrey competing for Clontarf the other day, and he scored, like Maura Trask said, he might have scored 1-3 for the club or whatever. This question won't go away. He is irreplaceable in a way. You look at that Dublin defence as well. There's guys who have been the linchpin of that defence for a number of years who are getting old. I mean, you have the Philly McMahons, you have the Johnny Coopers, Cian O'Sullivan. You know, there's a good core of those guys are not the young pups they used to be. So this question will be around. And like I say, I can't really think of anything that Jack McCaffrey could or will come out and say that will make people go, okay, that's definitely a full stop at the end of his career.
The other interesting story alongside that in the Sunday Independent, David Goff is one of the most high-profile referees in the country. He has said that he's opting out for the 2020 season as well, Mortras. He's informed county board officials in Meath here, writes Donegal Boyle, that he won't be available to take charge of club games as long as social distancing is required. And he said the same applies for the inter-county game when it returns in October. He says here, as long as there's social distancing still in place, I won't be taking charge of club matches in Meath for the foreseeable future. It's only 2 months since 2 metres seemed to be a life and death matter. If I go to town now and I have to be 2 metres away from someone and wear a face mask at the same time, which is HSC advice, I don't understand how I can safely be in a confined space with 30 plus people on a football field and be socially distant. Until that changes, I won't be coming back. And obviously he's got a team of officials who are all family members as well, and they have differing circumstances. We suspected this may happen, I suppose, and David Goff's one of the more high-profile people to step back thus far.
Oh yeah, and there will be players as well, I'm sure, who for various reasons will decide they have to step back. Coaches, backroom team, stewards, which is something I haven't heard many people mention. And as we all know, the traditional stereotype of the GAA steward is usually the type of gentleman who might be really telling, please stay home for your own sake. So these are going to be issues that are going to come up. As far as David's concerned, they're his own personal circumstances, and he's made a judgment based on that. Now, like government advice and everything else is coming along in Croke Park, I'm sure there's room for manoeuvre for lots of Davids around the country. While they may deem it's unsafe for them now, it might be more safe, or they may feel more comfortable doing it later down the line. So I think it's important that everyone from David Goff down to whoever's playing or whoever, if they feel that they can't do it now, that there's no retribution in a few months' time if they feel they can, that they should be welcomed back, because this is an issue that nobody ever would have planned. And as we all know, all our circumstances are different, and what might suit me might not suit you. But it is going to become an issue, definitely, as I think once people actually sit down and once it becomes very, very real. The huge advantage that the GAA has is that it's outdoors, which automatically makes it a hell of a lot safer than any indoor sport. And they have a lot of grounds, which means they can, they can move games if they need to. And I think people, while they mightn't be always happy with it, I think we'll understand if a choice is to move a game to somewhere that it's safer for everyone, people will go along with that, and that's one big advantage the GAA will have. But I do think as the year goes on, and sure, we don't know, this could come back for a second wallop for us, we don't know. As things go on, people's decisions will change and move with the tide as well.
Yeah, well, that's David Goff out for the time being anyway. He said, not a decision I took lightly, thought very hard about it, based on my own personal circumstances and those of my umpiring team. And I don't want to put them or myself in harm's way based on our personal situations. So that's front page of the Sunday Independent. While we're on it then, Brendan, just to kick off the theme for the next few minutes of, broadly speaking, GAA's return. Lots of pieces about it in the paper. Front page of the Sunday Independent, for instance, miracle of winter wonderland has lifted national morale. This is Eamon Sweeney, talks about Waterford versus Cork, Limerick taking on Clare, Wexford, Galway, the Rebels against the Kingdom, and Monaghan, Cavan, Derby, Tyrone meeting Donegal. The thought of them as welcome and unexpected as a bottle of champagne would be to a man recently rescued from the desert. And then he goes on to say, not only is the GAA hoping to lift our COVID battered national morale, they've decided to simultaneously take on the fearsome opponent, which is the Irish winter. Our least favourite season will be transformed from a dark and dreary endurance test to a garden of arcane delights. Later on he says, November won't be a black pit of despair anymore. I was like, Jesus, Eamon Sweeney hates winter. He really does not like winter here.
Yeah,
November won't be a black pit of despair anymore.
Yeah, he probably has. I mean, Eamon did the gig of covering, excuse me, covering live sport as well. And I actually remember one of the last times I saw aiming at a game was a Division 2 football final between Kerry and Laois in the Gaelic grounds. It was actually Colin Cooper's debut for Kerry, and it was one of those horrendous Irish spring days. It's just wind and rain everywhere. So maybe he has that kind of memory stuck in his mind as he's writing the article. But I mean, look, in terms of, you know, places you wouldn't really choose to be in a normal year, I would say the top deck of the Hogan stand in December is probably high up there. But look, we've had Republic of Ireland games there. We've had November internationals in the rugby. I'm sure we'll all be very happy to add a couple of extra layers to whatever it is we're wearing to get a, you know, the unique scenario of two All-Ireland finals in mid to late December. So yeah, like I say, there's an awful lot about this in the papers today. We've a lot of conjecture about this whole club versus county thing and some very interesting takes on it.
Yeah, do you want to kick us off then? What caught your eye? Because actually, I mean, Eamon Sweeney's dead right. He sums up the mood. This is brilliant. This is going to be great to have back, and it will make for a very different winter. And the thought of All-Ireland finals in December as we build up to Christmas is a very pleasant one indeed. But the county versus club situation is almost the substantive issue that people have got their teeth into. So everybody from Colin O'Rourke to Joe Brolly, Shane McGrath's writing about it in the Mail on Sunday as well, and others. Turlock O'Brien's got strong things to say about it as well. Where do you want to start? And we'll give people a flavour of what's been written.
Yeah, just to start off maybe with the Joe Brolly piece, and the first 4 columns of it, I cursed and sweared my way through it with this kind of, you know, why do you support an English club thing, which just is like nails on a blackboard for me. But then he finally gets to interesting stuff in the last column and a half, where he's talking about the Derry County Board's take on it, and a guy called Stephen Barker, who's the Derry Board chairman. And Turlock O'Brien, the former Carlow manager, touches on this in his piece as well. And it just seems so obvious when you read it about it's all club versus county. It's head banging head, and never shall the twain meet. And what the two lads in their own ways just talk about, that's so obvious. And it goes back to Brian Cody, who was always let his Kilkenny players off to the clubs. It's this marriage of the two levels of the game, and how it should be really beneficial for everybody. But there's a great line that Joe Brolly quotes from one of the guys in his piece today, and it says, "It's true that a lot of the best players in the county being Derry, haven't been playing for the county, but it's also true that a lot of the best administrators haven't been playing for the county either." And Colin O'Rourke mentions it as well by saying, you know, the buck nearly has to stop somewhere. And O'Rourke's argument is that if the people at the county board level say something is the case, well, then it will be the case. And it just seems that there's a lot of kind of, you might call it soft power going on from Croke Park down to the county boards. And it's like, there won't be any sanctions. And the county manager gets to make the say on it. And maybe it calls for a couple of people in positions of power to say, the buck stops here, this is what we're going to do. Club comes before county, and we move on.
Yeah. Joe Brolly's piece, and we'll come back actually to the Premier League side of it later on, maybe, because it's definitely very interesting. I sort of found myself agreeing probably with a chunk of what he said, I have to say, yeah. Maybe I'm becoming cynical in my old age, but he's very supportive of what's going on in Derry. And it seemed like this is going to be a very interesting, almost experiment, really. So Derry's County Board, you know, there's a huge amount of new blood gone in there. A lot of people in their 30s and 40s. Stephen Barker is the County Board chairman. So, for instance, Joe Brolly writes that in Derry, the clubs will have 11 weeks of action exclusively without any county commitments getting in the way. Strikingly, he says, the board did not consult with Rory Gallagher, the senior football manager. They simply informed him politely. And he went on to talk about the ambitions for the county board, which is just to get a thriving club scene going again, to reunite the county. We must stand up to the GPA. I mean, you can see why Joe Brolly is on board with this. Create a chain of command where the county manager understands his role, reconnect the clubs in the county, talks about how, you know, getting club football and Derry United will lead to the county team having success in the next 3-4 years and winning an Ulster title. So, you know, Brolly is absolutely supportive of this and sees it as a necessary rebalancing. Colin O'Rourke above that, Mortras, is talking about the opposite attitude, which is going to be the case in numerous counties, I suppose. You know, he's just making the point that ultimately, as Brennan says, the county executive have to govern here properly. And basically, what we've had in the GAA for far too long is 32 fiefdoms, where anything goes depending on who's in charge. He says it's been even rumoured, he says, that one county's already looking for challenge matches. Now, if people haven't seen this, what's meant to happen, according to the GAA centrally, is club action from 31st of July to 11th of October. Inter-county teams can start training from the 14th of September, and then their championship starts 17th of October. So already it seems those rules are being broken. And O'Rourke writes about an absence of moral fibre in the executives of very many county boards who profess allegiance to the central authority of the GAA, but do exactly the opposite. The chairperson is the leader of a county board. The buck stops with them. And he goes on to say, sadly, many county boards just roll over and allow county managements to dictate what's going to happen. The tail is wagging the dog in an even greater way than before the lockdown. If county managers wanted to bring in their players once a week to monitor fitness and injuries and so on, I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. Why not designate one day a week for county action? However, the reality is that there are counties where players will not be training with their clubs much, if at all, during the so-called club window. This is flying in the face of what the GAA has asked for.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And he's given shout-outs as well. We've heard of Derry doing what people see to be a good idea. Offaly have gotten a lot of publicity as well in the positive press and doing it. My own county, Galway, which is one of the kind of few counties in the country that has, football and hurling at equal strength. And you can imagine there's only so many weekends around it. They've done a fairly decent job, to be fair to them. And I know the county board have deservedly gotten their criticism over the years, but the wheel is changing there. So I think, if I'm right from memory, every club member, club players will be guaranteed a minimum of 3 games, and over 60% will get a minimum of 4. And it also allows a window for the county team to get themselves, the two male county teams to get themselves together as well. So that's progress, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. But Colm O'Rourke is right here. Like I cannot fathom, and obviously I don't have the privilege of being a county board meeting, so I don't understand, and I cannot fathom, and I cannot understand why, when every single club player, and county player for the most part as well, are saying, please give us a break here, let us do it properly, let us enjoy it, let us not be injured, let's protect our bodies and our minds and give our supporters and our parishes what they want. I just do not understand why these county board chair people, and it's mostly chairmen, most chair people do not say, okay, I hear you, this is what we're hearing from people. They don't do it. I don't understand why county managers are given, for the most part, a carte blanche to say, this is how it is, this guy is not allowed to play for his club. Like Colm O'Rourke was into people making up reasons, to not be training for their club. So it's not like the county manager didn't say, as I didn't say he couldn't play. He can't. Look at him. He's injured. He's fatigued. He's got a stress fracture. Making up injuries, making up reasons. Find me an inter-county player who's not carrying some kind of an injury. It happens because they're elite athletes and they're supposed to be managed. Why? I don't know. I cannot fathom, and I'm actually lost for words, which is rare for me, why a county board cannot say, this is how it is, we're bringing you in, we're trusting you to look after our players and player welfare, and everybody else is screaming, this is not how it's done. And I can't even, Colm O'Rourke says, where does he have it? He says Croke Park can't be expected to kind of deal with it. Why not? I mean, we saw there during the week, Uachtar and John Horan coming out saying, these are the sanctions, but we probably won't implement them. Like, that's talking out of two sides out of your mouth. Of course, county managers are going to take the proverbial and do what they're getting away with. Why wouldn't they? If I was in their shoes, I'd do the exact same. But he cites the samples of Sean Boylan and Brian Cody, 2 managers. Obviously, they trust their players. And sometimes I think managers forget their players are grown men. They are adults with lives and jobs. If you can't trust that player to go off out to their club, play their socks off for their club, that's where they came from, and progress and grow and develop and come back a better player, what are you doing looking at him to begin with? It makes me angry. I'm getting very angry about over the last few years, because obviously my other line of work is sports psychology, and I deal with players who are tormented by this, and it's not fair. And especially the poor county player is being ripped apart because he's getting abuse at home for not showing up for his club game. He's getting abuse from his manager if he shows up to the county game. And what does he end up? Broken ligaments pulled off and tendons damaged, hips being replaced by the age of 30. It's not on. Yeah, because Shane McGrath writes about this as well in the Mail, and he mentions Tom Ryan, Director General of the GAA, on Friday. As Shane says, he rather sweetly sought to rely on the virtues of the GAA community in respecting the plan, and therefore said he doesn't think we'll need sanctions, and he talked about personal responsibility. The problem here, Brendan, is very straightforward from the county manager point of view. They will look at club training and they will say, well, the training that we can provide and the sports science we can provide is superior, and I want all my players on the same sheet. I don't want those 4 lads whose club training isn't up to scratch coming back to me and we're not ready for a championship, and I'll be the one getting abused when we're knocked out and we put in a bad performance. And
and so on. And the reality is, county boards do want the county to do really well. Like, they will be judged as much as anything. Like, we talk here about county boards not having their act together largely when a county team don't go well. The structures mustn't be right. That criticism comes their way. But I do agree with Morris's point that I've never understood why centrally the GAA can't control a bit more. Like, it really, as a GAA person, you really, to too much of an extent, in my opinion, are just at the whim of whatever county executive you happen to be born to. Centrally, there's just not enough oversight.
Well, what struck me reading these pieces today, this is not an analogy I ever thought I'd use, but the GAA's approach is kind of like the Tory party in England with
now, Brendan, they're not going to like that wherever this is going.
Exactly, and I never thought I'd say this, and look, bear with me for a second here. What are the Tories doing in the UK? Please stay indoors, but, well, if you don't, I'm not going to sanction you. You're appealing to people to use their common sense, but we've seen in the beaches of Bournemouth and Brighton in previous weeks, people don't have common sense when it comes to things like this. And if you're just going to allow people to do whatever they want, let's call a spade here. When the lockdown started, first of all, we all know of anecdotal stories of counties who train at times through it. Those stories are out there. So the GAA knows this is happening, and it's by basically saying there won't be any sanctions imposed. That's like the Tory party saying, look, the cops aren't going to stop you if you're travelling from, London up to whatever castle it was that Dominic Cummings goes to. That's what you're going to get. Mortrassa used the phrase a carte blanche. That's exactly what it is. And when you look at it, if you're looking at it from a playing point of view, it made so much sense to have the county game first and then the club afterwards. And whatever the reasoning that went in behind it was, and Colin O'Rourke's piece today is talking about, okay, you get the county game second, you have a better chance, as things stand, of having more spectators at the game and getting more money through the gates. But again, as we've discussed already, there's a chance that we could have a second wave that could come in the middle of flu season, which for 2020 is going to be smack bang in the middle of your county season. So in a lot of ways, it would have made a lot more sense to have the county game first. You would have got rid of all this club versus county stuff, would have run off the inter-county football and hurling championships. That would be done with, and the rest of the year is all club. There is nothing else to distract from it. So, look, it's a really hard one for the GAA to do, to get all, like any normal year, for them to get all their ingredients into the one pie. We've seen it before. It's next to impossible. But I just hope that we're not here in the middle of November and December saying, did they put the cart before the horse?
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football is back.
Liverpool have got it front, and Sadio Mane scored.
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Come on, Tom, are you nearly finished hanging that plasterboard?
I'm going as fast as I can, but...
Have you not heard? The Tech 7 adhesive and sealant lads have introduced a new foam adhesive, Tech 7 Foam Tack.
Oh, Foam Tack? I heard people talking about that, all right.
Well, you should be using that. Tech 7 Foam Tack is super strong, quick and easy to use, inside or outside.
You're right. I'm out of here.
Home early?
Nah, to the builders merchants to buy my Tech 7 Foam Tack, of course. Tech 7 Foam Tack, available now at your local builders merchants.
OTB AM.
Yeah, if you want to get involved in the conversation this morning, 0879 180 180 is the number. You can WhatsApp us. You can also get us on Twitter, @OffTheBall, @OffTheBallAM is the specific Twitter handle for this show. You can just use the hashtag OTBAM. Nathan is with us this morning. Nathan, how are you?
Morning.
The GAA as the Tory party is something that I'm sure will have people choking on their cornflakes from yesterday and again today. It's an interesting analogy Brendan O'Brien came up with there.
It's hard to disagree that it's a total hands-off approach they're taking towards inter-county managers who can do whatever the hell they want over the next few months, because if John Horan and Tom Ryan haven't sat down by now to think about any possible sanctions, you can't imagine they're going to come up with it over the next few weeks. And I don't know, are they going to set up some sort of a hotline where you can ring in if you see an inter-county team training in more than a group of four?
It's too late. It is that horse has bolted and is whinnying away in the fields far in the distance. If you want to hear the full podcast of the pay-per-view, by the way, you can subscribe. The best place to get all our podcasts now is on the OTB Sports app. You can personalise your own feed and make sure that anytime we do upload a new podcast, we'll ping you a little message. So if you just turn your notifications on, it's a great way of staying in touch with all the content that we're providing. There's two quick things that we want to talk about. Jack McCaffrey is stepping away. We don't know if it's just for this year or if indeed this is the end of his intercounty football career. And we're hearing different things about it being work-related or non-work related. It's possible it's a little bit of both, that actually he would have been able to commit to the amount of time, but given that he's working in healthcare, perhaps he didn't feel like this was a good time for him to be mixing with patients and then mixing with his team. And, there's a million different things that I think we could speculate about behind his rationale for stepping away. And until he comes out and says, it's for this reason, it's for this long, i.e. forever, or just for this year, or until a vaccine is found or whatever, it's probably a waste of time speculating about that. But what does it actually mean for the championship, Nathan?
Well, you're already heading into a scenario where Dublin are without Jim Gavin, and Dessie Farrell's had a few league games, but is now going to go straight back into championship football, more or less, without really having an opportunity to get his message across. We'd Bernard Brogan on the show on Friday night talking about the link-up play he had with Paul Flynn, which was done on session and routine and regularity, that eventually they did this so often that he would know exactly what Flynn was going to do and Flynn would know exactly what Brogan was going to do. That if Dessie Farrell wanted to change things, he's not really going to have a huge amount of time on the training ground to do it. And therefore, if he was planning on bringing in new players, maybe he's just going to have to go with the old guard once again. So not having Jack McCaffrey as a part of that is a huge blow. So listen, Owen Merchant could step in and end up being Footballer of the Year this year. They'll have other options there who've just been waiting for this moment. Remember, he did miss last year's All-Ireland final replay and Dublin still managed to win the All-Ireland. But as we touched on earlier, you're talking about the most exciting player in intercounty football, the one guy who can just demolish an opponent from deep in the field. And any team, as good as Dublin are, as great as it is to have Stephen Cluxton and to still have Brian Fenton, who, people may argue is on a par at the very least with Jack McCaffrey in terms of who's the best footballer in the country now.
That's the level we're talking about. We're talking about the best footballer in the country. One and 1A. There's a hair's breadth between them, and you would say that maybe McCaffrey was better last year by a tiny bit, and so therefore is currently in Owen Sheehan's power rankings. I suspect that he would have Jack McCaffrey 1 right now.
Oh, but Jack McCaffrey as well, it's the big day, the big occasion. Every time when he was fit enough to play, if it was a semi-final or a final, he delivered. And from his position, to do that is just incredible. So whereas Brian Fenton's playing in the middle of midfield and it's always going to be involved, Jack McCaffrey took every game by the scruff of the neck. So, yeah, it's as big a shock as you could have had over the weekend in terms of a player missing the championship.
It brings Kerry right back into it.
Were they ever out of it?
Well, it brings them like neck and neck. Oh, so look, you talk to the Kerry people, they're like, oh, well, sorry, I talk to Owen all the time, right? And he's like, oh, no, look, we're miles away. We're 2-3 seasons away yet from actually being... I'm like, what happened last year? It's like, oh, no, that was just a one-off flame up, and loads of those players now are a year older. The ones who were like driving that forward, as opposed to the young lads who were absolutely sensational, who are now a year older and a year more mature and have been, no doubt, having the crack over the period of lockdown, kicking free after free after free and perfecting their craft. So, I think that, allied with the fact that this isn't going to be a championship that goes all the way into February or March next year, which would give the Dubs a big chance to get ahead of steam up, I think it does mean that Galway, Mayo, Tyrone, Donegal, and you would say Kerry are all that little bit closer.
Without question, but how close is closer? I still think that Dublin team are a million miles ahead of everyone else.
I don't think they're a million miles.
The vast majority of the time.
If it's lashing rain and it's howling a gale and it's 6-4 at half time, they can't do the things. Their advantage was pace in many aspects and ball control. And pace and ball control become less important when the giant dump of rain that we've seen in some of those... Like, you think of Conor McManus kicking points from both touchlines in Croker in a gale, and you're like, well, if he can do that in a gale, he's going to be able to keep Monaghan in a game. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I'm not saying.
I'm not as convinced the weather is going to be as bad in November as December as you are. It might be cold, but it may not be horrific. So it may be just okay. Also, we don't know where fixtures are going to take place. Dublin are going to play every game, you'd imagine, now in Croke Park again. So it's not like they're going to be dragged around the country. It's not like they're going to end up in Oma, where they may end up being shocked at some stage. They're going to be on their home soil. They're not going to have any travelling. Again, as life is getting back to some sort of normality, and there's an awful lot of pressure on players from other counties in terms of having to travel to training and all that. Again, all the advantages that the Dubs always had are still there.
Yeah, well, maybe.
And I do wonder if Jack McCaffrey will be the last. I did wonder this coming into the championship, that they are amateur players, and an awful lot of intercounty players, I'm sure, have been out of work, have been struggling and stressing throughout all of this. And while I'm sure there's a desire to get back and to train, actually, for an awful lot of people, the last 6 months of the year, providing everything goes okay, it's going to be an incredibly busy time as you're playing catch up on all that you missed. So for an awful lot of players to try and commit to training twice a week, to matches every weekend for 2-3 months, you may not be the last one to step away.
Well, David Goff obviously stepped away as well, and until social distancing or a vaccine arrives. And, you know, a very high-profile referee who's one of the best referees in the game at the moment, and he suspects that there will be other people stepping away as well. And it was a family unit that would have been his umpire group as well. So you can see that this is the start of it, and I'd say over the next couple of weeks we'll see many more people making that decision. Hopefully not too many. Ideally the championship will be as strong as it possibly can be. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. Obviously, if you have any comments for us, use the hashtag OTB AM on Twitter, leave a comment on the YouTube stream, or indeed wherever you're watching us. The best place to watch us these days, though, is the OTB Sports app. You can download that if you just search OTB Sports. Obviously, Liverpool won the league on Thursday night. We brought you a brilliant show on Friday's OTB AM, 2.5 hours packed with Liverpool legends, fans and players' reaction as well, of course, as John Giles singing You'll Never Walk Alone. Shane Keegan and Michael Verney joined Neil for the Saturday panel, and they got talking about the obsession with Liverpool at home here in Ireland. This one sparked fairly lively debate online, as you might imagine. Have a watch.
A story like Liverpool winning the Premier League title, one thing you can appreciate it for is that it shows us sport is more than just the kind of the facts and figures, the numbers, the results. It's about the journey.
There's us watching on. That special feeling probably didn't carry as much weight, but as I say, look, whether you're a Liverpool fan or not, I think everybody has kind of bought into it this year because they've been off that top spot for so long. Now look, I'd still have my gripe with our with the hardcore Liverpool support over here that maybe, you know, seem to maybe go over the top with it a little bit. But I suppose none of us are the most gracious of winners either, are we?
What are the little bits? Tell us the little bits that are grating you. Come on, this is an open forum. Share with us. We're among friends here, Shane.
Look, you know, it's the League of Ireland head in me, I suppose. So it is. You know how I still can't wrap my head around how somebody could get as emotional or as wrapped up in something like that as you would do if your own to use your comparison, as if how could it feel the same as if your own county won an All Ireland or even if your own League of Ireland side won a title when you're part of that club and you're there week in, week out. I just can't see how it could be emotion on the same level, to be honest with you.
Nathan?
It's a lot of nonsense, isn't it? It's absolute nonsense. Why can't people just enjoy success? Like, to suggest that Liverpool supporters in Ireland, and there's been a lot of this over the weekend, can't have a connection with the team because they didn't grow up in the city, ignores 20, 30 years of what people have gone through and the sense of community that they have, whether it's for Liverpool or Manchester United or Arsenal. You can be as passionate as you want for a football team. You can dedicate huge amounts of your life to supporting a football team like an intercounty team. And it's also ignoring the fact that there's large chunks of this country who couldn't care less about intercounty football or intercounty hurling, who might be soccer people or rugby people or tennis people.
No,
so
you're not allowed. You're not allowed.
Like, it is one of the brilliant things.
The accident of the field of your birth decides what you're allowed to like and what you're not allowed to like. And if you step outside that, you are Homer Simpson wearing a pink shirt and everybody else wearing a white shirt. And woe betide Homer in the pink shirt.
You're right. And I think the GAA in some ways have done a brilliant job. I would almost call it the monopolization of volunteerism, which is the GAA do it brilliantly, that we are the volunteers of this country. We do things that no other organisation could do. Whereas there are thousands upon thousands of volunteers every weekend on rugby, soccer, tennis, any of these sports, athletics, who love their sport more than any other sport. But their governing bodies don't do as good. And it always annoyed me, because I would have grown up in a soccer house, that the FAI never treated the people who go out and run underage games like the GAA do, and they don't revere them in the same way. They don't respect them, and they don't help them out the same way. And I think that all bleeds into this attitude of that soccer, somehow it's not as natural for you to be as passionate about supporting Liverpool or Manchester United, that it shouldn't mean as much.
Shane Keegan's a football man, though.
That's why I was very surprised. Well, as he touched on a league, and like the League of Ireland thing makes no sense. Michael Verney went on to say, he's from Offaly, he'd never even been to a League of Ireland game, never even been to an Athlone Town game. Like, the League of Ireland isn't accessible to everybody. I grew up in Mayo for many years as a youngster. Like, Galway United didn't exist. Once I moved to Galway, I got into it, but there was no great sense that Galway United or Sligo Rovers were coming looking for the support of the people of Mayo to give them this connection. Even though, again, there's such a huge footballing base in counties like Mayo, there's no League of Ireland team, so you're not going to have that connection. Whereas people grow up, particularly I think the generation that's probably annoying, which is people in their 30s and 40s who grew up watching Ronnie Whelan and Ray Houghton, and these were the heroes of the Irish team, and these were the heroes then of that Liverpool team. Likewise, a decade earlier, whether it was Arsenal, when you had Frank Stapleton and David O'Leary and Liam Brady, there was this pride of Irish people.
All the way back to the 50s and 40s, where,
Everton.
Arthur Fitzsimons was inspiring a young John Giles, and then John Giles inspires the next generation, and it's totally fine and totally legitimate for one part of people to like one thing. I don't mind about the point about the administrators. The GAA did a great marketing job, and that's fair. That's what the administrators. It's the bootlickers who follow them along, who are like, "Wow, you can't like that, and you can't like that, and how can you possibly? Sure, that means nothing to you." That's the type of stuff that I think is. This is a local town for local people. It has a bang of. It just has a bang of little Irelander off it, and I'm like, no thanks. I'm out on this petty little nationalist point where that sport is not accessible to you, and you're not allowed. And I am somehow diminishing your right to enjoy that sport by virtue of the fact that I like this other sport, and I'm clearly superior. Because it's
Joe Brodley's article yesterday is that he went off football and the fandom around football when he heard of Ashley Cole's story, and he was only getting the 55 grand instead of the 60 grand, and goes on that the players, shock horror, Premier League footballers don't really care about you and I. They don't care about the supporters. They don't really have a connection. They're doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the money. And as if that should take away from your support for the club. As if people sitting in Ireland are going, I have a deep connection with Jordan Henderson. He is doing this for me. He is doing it for the little guy over in the west of Ireland. No, they support the club because they've supported the club for decades upon decades and have dedicated, like, the amount of memories I'm sure so many Liverpool supporters have of, which we touched on Thursday, the pain of the last 2-3 decades. Shared experience. Like, that is what support is. Whether it's for a county team, for a club team. It's obviously a different thing with Premier League sides because most people don't get to go every single week with 20 of their mates like you might with a GAA match. But it doesn't make it a lesser thing.
No. If anybody has any views on this, 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. 14 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Let's get to Shane Hannon. Shane, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. Just a couple of things on the Liverpool celebrations, so the local celebrations. I know, Jerry, you had, I think, mentioned that you heard fireworks going off at the full-time whistle.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a similar situation here in Monaghan. As soon as the full-time whistle went, fireworks in local housing estates. Not only that, but the day after. So the local Liverpool Supporters Club branch, I assume it was an organised thing, but around 30 cars met up in the pissing rain, it has to be said, at a local filling station here in Monaghan Town. They drove a procession through Monaghan Town, horns blaring, Liverpool flags soggy out the window, scarves hanging out the back. They met at the local Monaghan courthouse and sang Liverpool chants for about an hour in the rain, which was extraordinary to me. This was doing the rounds on WhatsApp groups in Monaghan here. And I'm kind of on the fence. I can see the one side, that their passion is clearly something to be jealous of, and fair play to them, 30 years and all that. But the other side of you is like, Jesus, lads, come on. I mean, don't get me wrong. If Monaghan won the All-Ireland, I'd get Banty McEnany's signature tattooed on my face.
You're a Man United fan, though, right?
Yeah.
So, like, in 30 years' time, come back to me, Shane, when they've won nothing and you win your first one in 30 years. Like, for me, the thing is, like, editing other people's joy and enjoyment. It's like music snobbery. It's like people going, oh, Fortnite, how can you spend so much time in a computer game? It's like, because that's what I want to do. I choose this thing. I choose it. It's an option for me to spend my time, and my free time in particular. I'm not giving up my job to do this. I'm not like selling my family to slavery. I'm not giving up an organ. This is my spare time. And in my spare time, I choose to read and consume about Liverpool, if that's your thing, or for whatever it is, and they go and they celebrate together. Like, if they were bikers with long beards and they went and played music for an hour outside the courthouse, people would be mildly threatened, I suspect. But at the end of it, they'd be like, oh, look, they have a shared common interest and away they go. Is that not all that is?
It could be. It could be, look, a smidgen of jealousy, a smidgen of...
a smidgen. I think exact same conversation with Team 33's Enda Call on air on Friday, where he was making the point that Liverpool supporters are terrible winners. And I asked, why is that? They're talking about it. It's like, they just won the league for the first time in 30 years. Of course they're going to talk about it. Of course they're going to celebrate it. And Shane, if Manchester United sometime in the next 10 years win the Premier League, there'll be 30 of them up around Monaghan town, driving everybody demented.
Can I just,
that's the way it is.
On the point with Enda, right? Enda is a Celtic fan. Did Enda give out about the procession that was in Gweedore? I don't know if you saw the footage. It sounds exactly the same as the footage that you're talking, except it was in the middle of lockdown, right? And we showed the footage, and I expected there to be a bit of a backlash, and I think there probably was from some people, but I was looking at it going, fair play to them. This obviously means a lot to them. Now, you can argue slightly that Celtic and Donegal have a bigger connection than Monaghan Town and Liverpool, but not much. Not really, not that much. Can you?
I think it was more surprise. We were all just surprised to see it. It probably, it's that thing. Look, they're so excited, and obviously it's the first time in 30 years. Fair play to them, let them do it. But I wasn't massively surprised to see the Celtic thing.
What were you saying, Nathan?
Everything is they. As if they're the enemy.
Them and us.
Well, look, Shane, what sports news do we have?
Yeah, we're starting with English soccer across the channel, lads. So obviously that's the big thing that we're talking about. Holders Manchester City beating Newcastle by 2-0 at St James's Park. We could have a London derby in the FA Cup final, by the way. We could also have a Manchester derby. So either way, it's going to be rather interesting in the cup final. But Man City beating Newcastle 2-0 at St James's Park last night. That sets up their FA Cup semi with Arsenal. Kevin De Bruyne and Raheem Sterling scoring those goals for Man City in that game. The Gunners advanced with a 2-1 win over Sheffield United. That was at Bramall Lane, of course, yesterday. Danny Ceballos scoring an injury time winner for Arsenal after Republic of Ireland international David McGoldrick had equalised for the Blades. City have already won the League Cup this season, of course, and are still in the Champions League. Chelsea's 1-0 win away to Leicester City yesterday means they'll face Manchester United at Wembley next month. Ross Bartley's second half goal proving to be the difference in that game. In the Premier League yesterday as well, Watford still just 1 point above the relegation zone, so they'll be in a bit of trouble after their 3-1 defeat at home to Southampton. Danny Ings scoring twice, while James Ward-Prowse was also on target in that game. 3 Watford players unavailable for that match after striker Andre Gray held a birthday party at his home, breaking coronavirus lockdown rules, which was a bit of a bummer for them. But tonight, Crystal Palace hosting Burnley. That's at Sellers Park. That's an 8 p.m. kickoff in the Premier League. Also, the manner of the League Two playoff final at Wembley tonight, Exeter facing Northampton. That sees Wembley Stadium hosting its first major football match since the start of the coronavirus outbreak. Huddersfield are still in the Championship's relegation zone following yesterday's 3-1 defeat to Nottingham Forest. That result strengthened Forest's position in the playoff places, taking them up to 4th. Sheffield Wednesday climbed to 13th in the early kickoff, beating Bristol City. That was by 2-1. Meanwhile, Steve Bruce has called for the Premier League to provide clarity over the proposed takeover of Newcastle after his team were beaten by Man City yesterday in the FA Cup. The £300 million deal, financed by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, has yet to be given the green light, and Bruce admits it is a distraction.
They've got to come and make a decision sooner or later, because it's not healthy for anybody. But look, as I said, for me personally, is we've got another game Wednesday. We'll give ourselves wonderful opportunity. We can't use that as an excuse, but we need a bit of clarity on it and put to bed one way or the other.
To matters in Spain as well this morning, lads. Real Madrid are 2 points clear at the top of La Liga after grinding out a victory at bottom club Espanyol. Casemiro scoring the only goal. He lashed onto Karim Benzema's brilliant no-look backheel through the legs of defender Bernardo Espinosa before firing home. Real Madrid are now only 6 wins or 5 wins and a draw from a second La Liga title since 2012. City rivals Atletico can do them a favour when they visit Barcelona. That game is on Thursday. The golf as well was concluded overnight. Dustin Johnson claiming a one-shot win. That was at the Travellers Championship in Connecticut, heavily hit by pullouts due to the coronavirus as well. The American ended up on 19 under par. That was 1 ahead of Kevin Streetman. World number 1, Rory McIlroy, finishing just outside the top 10 on 13 under par, while Open champion Shane Lowry ended up on 4 under. Meanwhile, the NBA and the NBPA announced on Friday that 16 players have tested positive for COVID-19 out of 302 that were tested on the 23rd of June. The NBA has plans to restart the season. That's on the 31st of July in Orlando, Florida. The news came on the same day that Florida announced almost 9,000 new COVID-19 cases, which was for them a single-day record. Craig Gordon has signalled the end of his Celtic career. The 37-year-old had been offered a new contract on much reduced terms after losing his starting spot to Fraser Forster last season. He has, though, decided to accept a new challenge instead. The Scotland international and former Sunderland player is understood to be considering an offer to return to Hearts and has held talks with other clubs. And finally, for me this morning, lads, Magical added another Group 1 to her tally yesterday, landing the Pretty Polly Stakes for Shamie Heffernan and Aidan O'Brien at the Curragh. In terms of today's racing, plenty of domestic action today with racing at Kilbeggan and indeed Limerick.
We'll keep an eye on all the racing for you as well. Sensational weekend, obviously, for Aidan O'Brien with regards to the Derby, and some speculation in the papers this morning that we might see a quick reappearance from the Derby winner next weekend as well. Shane, good stuff as well. Thanks very much for that. Shane Hannon with us, bringing you the sports news this morning. One other big sports story overnight, if you haven't heard already, Cam Newton has joined the New England Patriots, so he is going to be the quarterback, more than likely the starting quarterback for the Patriots. A heavily incentive-laden deal, which will see him link up with Bill Belichick. Now, here's what's coming up for you. We've already done we're getting into the sports pages now. Alan Smith is going to join us in about 5 minutes' time to talk to us about the career of the late great Theo Foley, who was part of that backroom team when that club was incredibly successful. Keith Wood's going to join us to set the scene for Clare's Mount Rushmore, our BMW Run and Ride, the latest instalment of that. We'll give you the details of Nathan's terrific return from injury over the last week. And Mount Rushmore today is County Clare. Sil O'Connor and Jamesie O'Connor are going to talk to us about who should be on Clare's sporting Mount Rushmore. So that's between now and the end of the show. You can tweet us using the hashtag OTB AM. But the best way to consume the show now these days, obviously, is on the OTB Sports app. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
I am going to start with OTBsports.com, which is obviously leading this morning with the big story of the day. It's who is going to end up on Clare's Mount Rushmore. The contenders are all there for you. Brendan O'Brien's comment yesterday that the GAA are acting like the Tory party is one of our most read stories over the last while. Celtic's new kit for the 2021 season has been leaked, and apparently it looks very nice. And Roy Keane, quite the Paul Pogba fan, it turns out. That's some comments from his piece in the Sunday Indo yesterday. So that's what's on OTBsports.com for you this morning.
The Examiner has McCarthy fears football becoming poor relation. This is the Cork football manager, Ronan McCarthy's criticised the structure of the 2020 All-Ireland Football Championship, describing as unacceptable that football teams have to do a straight knockout, whereas the Hurling Championship will have a back door. Of course, Cork have to face Kerry in their first match of the championship, which I'm sure is part of his thinking, and really means that any chance of progress in terms of kicking things on year is an absolute lost year. Now, they will have the last couple of weeks of the league at least to play before that from a Cork point of view, but trying to make progression up against maybe a shock Kerry, and it's one of the great days for Cork football.
And we've lost Kerry from the championship for the whole year.
Exactly. So I don't understand why they didn't go with some sort of Champions League style format and give teams 3 matches and everybody at least has a good reason. Because I wonder, is Ronan McCarthy talking to his players as well, who now know they're going into a 6 weeks of hardcore training with the county for potentially just 1 match. One of the other stories there is Derek McGrath unhappy with propaganda setting club against county. He was saying that there are advantages to players training with their counties over this period as well. And down the bottom, a couple more GAA stories. McCaffrey, Goff opt out, which we've touched on already this morning. And Fallon wants golden score instead of penalties. So as we heard on Friday, one of the more interesting stories is that every match will be decided on the day, going to penalties if needed. and Pat Spillane was making a good point on the Sunday game last night, that if, and remember, we've had a lot of close All-Ireland finals recently, if, for example, an All-Ireland final went to penalties, imagine being the guy who misses the penalty to cost your team an All-Ireland, and how, as an amateur player, you have to go and live with that. And a golden score, little 5-minute periods here and there may be a better solution, but it does look as though penalties are the way forward. And also inside a story from Davy Fitzgerald, who was not happy with some of the message boards down in Clare. He was actually speaking, we can listen to this audio, he was speaking on Today FM on Saturday, Davy Fitzgerald. Here's what he had to say.
I got absolutely lambasted last night in Clare for no reason whatsoever. And what actually gets me is faceless cowards that hide behind these, and I mean that, strongly mean this, faceless cowards that can say stuff and they don't have their name to back it up. And then that goes all around the place and people might look at it and think it's actually true. Like, it actually disgusts me, some of the stuff that goes on, to tell you the truth. My way of doing it is, I was told today that something was said, and I said, just leave it. It's not the truth. I've no interest in even looking at it or listening to it. And probably my dad has got a lot of stick being involved in the county board for years. And it's easy for everyone to say, don't take any notice. But after a length of time, if people keep persisting on it, it's hard. And you'd never know. This is all I'll say to you. Something could happen very soon that their legislation might come in, or someone will stand up to this. And as far as I know, something like that is happening, and it'd be great to bring a few of these cowards out from behind the keyboard. Like, it could get into your head, like, and I'm very strong in this, like, and I am urging the government to take serious action on this, because it's not good for the mental well-being of people that people can just go on and attack and not even have the credibility to put their name to it and stuff like that. That's not what we're about.
It's a fair point. I mean, look, it's absolutely a fair point that you shouldn't be able to say whatever you want anonymously online, because it can have a very detrimental impact. And we've seen so many people step away from social media because of the impact that it's having. The other side of this is that, unfortunately, there's a bit of a Barbara Streisand effect going on here. I don't know if everybody understands the Barbara Streisand effect. Sometimes I have to remind myself and Google it and exactly find out what it was. There was a photograph of her house, I think in 2003, that she took action to suppress. She lives in this unbelievable mansion in Malibu, and there was an aerial photograph of like this giant kind of, it looks like a massive hotel, but it's actually just her gaff on the cliffs looking down on the beach in one of the nicest parts of the world. And she wanted this to remain, you know, on the QT because it's her gaff. And so she issued loads of letters, and then everybody started to Google, where does Barbara Streisand live? And then suddenly everybody was looking at these pictures of her house. So then everybody went to look and see exactly what had been said on the Clare forum on Facebook. And it's grim enough. Like, it's this weird conspiracy theory that somehow Davy is trying to undermine the Clare hurling set up by asking the Clare football clubs to vote for a different type of... It's like, whoa, it is crazy stuff. But Davy...
I don't think it's the first time Davy's had issues with the Clare forum on Facebook either. It seems to be an ongoing problem that, again, it is an online forum where people feel they can say what they want. And as you say, a conspiracy theory, if it's that, takes hold and suddenly catches fire, particularly in a county like Clare, where they are hurling mad, and Davy is now very much the enemy, that it suddenly takes hold, becomes fact, and it just spins out of control.
Davy very much the enemy, but will he be on there Mount Rushmore this morning, Nathan? That's what I'm asking. It's the only question that we need answered today, and we will have it answered in about an hour's time. So,
are they talking about it on the Clare forum?
Oh, I've no doubt they are. I haven't checked. I suppose we should have checked that. Right, that full interview is on Pumped Up Kicks on Saturday afternoon on Today FM. The Irish Independent this morning, their back page is McCaffrey and immeasurable loss. This is Paul Caffrey saying this, and that is the penalty yesterday from Kevin De Bruyne. And O'Brien reveals Santiago could chase famous treble in Epsom Derby following Irish triumph. So the way that the season has lined up this year, it may end up being perfect for Santiago, the winner of the Irish Derby, after he led home a 1-2-3-4 for Aidan O'Brien in the Irish Derby. Apparently there's only a 10 grand entry supplemental fee to be paid today, so there's a possibility when they scope him and check him yesterday and see how he is doing this morning that they'll pay that 10 grand. He already has 6 Epsom hopefuls ready to go, and that's Marcus Armitage and Michael Verney's story in the back of the Indo. So big possibility that we might be getting some more Derby action in Epsom from Aidan O'Brien.
who says the FA Cup has lost all relevance. It is very much the main story on the Irish Times this morning, covering 3 of the matches from yesterday. Slick City leave Newcastle in the spin. Manchester City 3. So too Arsenal with that late winner by Ceballos. And also Ross Barkley scored the only goal as Chelsea beat Leicester. So we've Manchester United against Chelsea and Arsenal against Manchester City as the 2 FA Cup semi-finals.
The Mirror, the stories in the tabloids are all very similar today. So it's thick and mix. Fury as Hornets trio are all partied out. This is the best thing that could have happened for the other relegation threatened teams, is that 3 of the Watford lads are potentially out now for a couple of weeks. And maybe the rest of the season. Europe, the only way is Cup, Gunners, Lamps, thank you, Super Subs, and De Bruyne and Sterling get City dreaming of United. Faithful boss pushes for a club versus county compromise. There's plenty of us for us to get our teeth into on the club versus county issue. Those interesting comments here. We're talking about it a little bit earlier on from Derek McGrath as well.
In the star bark of the net, Ross Barkley, who scored that winner for Chelsea against Leicester. Boys Eye Hart deal. This is a transfer story that Joe Hart may well be on his way to Celtic. Again, they have that Watford story, which is just an incredible story. And with Watford, the position they're in, I'd imagine there's a fairly hefty fine coming for all 3 of them. And also more refs may go with Goff, which we touched on earlier, that David Goff may not be the last inter-county referee to step away, particularly when they have the issue that so many of them, it is almost a family-run business at times, the refereeing game, where their selectors go with them and as well. Selectors? What am I talking about? Umpires go with them as well. So it'll be interesting to see if that becomes an issue over the next few weeks.
The front of the Star this morning is out for the count. Cartel boss Daniel KO'd. Pro boxer says Kinahan has left sport. MTK gym is shut down, and they have a double-page spread. Now, in fairness, it's a double-page spread. It's Billy Joe Saunders on an interview with IFL TV, is that what it's called? And he says that Kinahan is walking away from boxing. Billy Joe Saunders, I always feel uncomfortable talking about him because he is such a horrible human being and has such a bad track record of things that he has said and done in his life that make you very reluctant to ever speak about him. But anyway, just breaking our own rules for once.
The back of the Sun, Golden Boot. Salah, I'm after you, Jamie. So Mo Salah has won the Golden Boot in each of the last 2 seasons in the Premier League. He is just 2 goals behind Jamie Vardy, who's going through a bit of a drought now. So Mo Salah obviously not wanting to spend too much time out of the Liverpool side over the last few weeks of the season. And Golden Booted, again, Watford turmoil as COVIDiot Gray is axed. That story of the house party that looks like it may well ruin Watford's season.
Is Mo Salah on a bonus for winning the Golden Boot?
You got to be on something. Also, I'm sure he's on a substantial goal bonus.
Is he?
So.
Is he not so good that he doesn't, like, a goal bonus is like...
You can be so good, get your 250 grand a week basic, but also get yourself a nice 30, 40 grand per goal.
Right. Okay.
And I'm sure in terms of his image rights, a 3-time in a row Golden Boot winner ain't going to be too bad.
Yeah, fair enough. It all adds up. That's official. GAA refs Chief Smith expects more opt-outs. That's Philip Lanigan's story about the slew of referees that may follow David Goff, and some sterling work by City. Manchester City bounced back from conceding the Premier League title to Newcastle by brushing aside Newcastle 2-0 in the FA Cup yesterday. And loss of McCaffrey would put real dent in Dub's quest for 6 in a row.
Back at the Guardian, Lampard turns air blue before super sub Barkley steals show. Seems Frank Lampard gave them a bit of a rollicking at half-time, which turned things around for Chelsea. And Deeney urges social media firms and MPs to act on racism. Interesting interview in there with Troy Deeney on his thoughts on how they can put some pressure on the various different social media firms to stop the constant racism that's appearing on some of them over the weekend.
The Telegraph this morning then is City bounce back to keep their treble dream alive, and Leicester in contract chaos with 12 players set to leave club. That's the Leicester Tigers. And rugby situation at the moment seems like a bit of a disaster, really. So they've put August 15th, I think, in the calendar for a return to Premiership action. Just wait and see exactly what kind of state that those clubs are going to be in by the time that rolls around.
The Racing Post owners to return to racecourse in trial starting on Wednesday, so possibility that owners may be allowed back this Wednesday, according to the Racing Post. Obviously, at the moment, there's not many people at all allowed at racetracks, so owners could be among the first to return. And they have that story that you touched on, that O'Brien not ruling out Epsom bid with Irish Derby team.
Herald, I think, is also Paul Caffrey's story where he's talking about how much of a loss it's going to be for Dublin without Jack McCaffrey, and we've got confirmation that Jack McCaffrey is, of course, stepping away now at this stage from the inter-county scene, for now anyway.
And finally, we have the Irish News, which is touching on the GAA and McAvoy. No call yet on venue for Tyrone v Donegal encounter. This is the Ulster Council Secretary Brian McAvoy saying that no definite decision has been made as to whether the quarter-final will take place in Ballybuffet or could well take place in Croke Park. There's all sorts of issues in terms of social distancing and what sort of crowd they could have. If social distancing were to remain in place, you'd be looking at a crowd of 1,100 in Ballybuffet for that game on what is probably going to be Halloween, whereas at Croke Park it could well be up to 21,000.
All right, and finally for me now, just a reminder, of course, what you can get on the OTB Sports app this morning. Let's have a look what you've got there. There's your home feed. You can select which of the stories that you actually want yourself, and then, of course, scroll down to get all of our best video and all of our best podcasts. But we've got a live radio station, OTB Sports, broadcasting for you 24 hours a day with all of our live shows and, of course, all of the best stuff from our archive over the last 18 years. It is 8:37 this morning. You can download the OTB Sports app in the App Store. Just search OTB Sports. Now, let's move on. Over the course of the weekend, it emerged that Theo Foley had passed away. He was an Arsenal legend, as well as being a giant of Irish football, and we thought that it was a good moment to try and pay a proper testimony to his life and times. And I'm delighted to say that we have one of his former players, Alan Smith, with us this morning to try and put some context on that. Alan, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Morning, I'm good, thank you. You?
Theo was one of those characters in Irish football who was kind of around that Arsenal team, and we never fully understood exactly what his role was, because obviously George Graham was such a titan and a big figurehead. But what was Theo's actual day-to-day role like?
Yeah, I mean, he was the balance to Georgie's disciplinarian type nature. Obviously, you couldn't get away with much with George, but Theo was the good cop to the bad cop, if you like. I mean, he was the assistant who would take us for the warm up, and we'd have a laugh and a joke before the gaffer came around the corner. I never forget one day. I don't think the gaffer was there, and we were running around the perimeter of London Colney, and we were in twos in a long line, and Niall Quinn was actually up the top with Theo, and he decided to rugby tackle Theo, and they ended up in a ditch. And, you know, some coaches might get quite annoyed about that, but we were all obviously in stitches. Theo just brushed himself down and got on with it. He was one of those characters. I mean, all the lads loved him, but he was also a good coach, and we all respected him as well. Obviously, he was at Anfield in 1989, and he was a big part of our success.
It's funny how you do need a bit of yin to yang when somebody like George Graham, because look, we kind of don't know exactly what Graham was like, but we know that he had that very stern exterior and a sharp tongue, it seems like. But you can't be like that the whole time, because otherwise, you know, work becomes a bit of a drudge.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the gaffer understood that with Theo. You know, they worked together at Millwall, and they were good friends. And I think George understood what Theo brought to the party in terms of his character. He was a great personality, always telling jokes. I remember one day in training, I had some kind of cramp in my hamstring, and they went, "Oh, I've got a spasm in my hamstring," and Theo was just falling about laughing, and from that moment on, he called me Spaz. That was my nickname, Spaz. But he just had that way with everyone. But you can't just be a joker, of course. If he was the assistant manager of a very successful team, so he knew his onions when it came to training.
Can you talk a bit about that? Because he obviously did know the game, and he played at a good level, and he played 9 times for the Republic of Ireland as well. In terms of his impact on the training ground and how that Arsenal team played, and particularly, I guess, that defensive structure that Arsenal side were so well known, how involved was he in the day-to-day training and implementation of what George Graham wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, he was heavily involved. He was always there. George would lead the session. You know, all those sessions we had with the back four, working on shape and everything, and Theo would be there. And then he was one of those that would go around to the individuals and having a quiet word. You know, you're okay with what boss is asking you to do here, and maybe explaining one or two things. So he was just that backup, but always out there on the training ground. Always used to tell us how good he was at penalties. I think he managed to convert one for Northampton one day, and he used to boast about his his expertise from 12 yards. And of course, we all used to take the mick out of him as well. But it was very affectionate with Theo. I mean, all the lads, I've spoken to a few of them since he passed away, and we're all devastated.
I didn't realise George Graham was quite the tracksuit manager then. He was obviously on the training pitch for every session, or as many as he could be. Yeah,
he was. Listen, the days that he weren't there, you could count on one hand if it was maybe a funeral or something. And on those days, you kind of thought, oh, we can relax a bit today, because he was always there, always there. He was a tracksuit manager. You'd see him jogging around the corner, and immediately you'd be up on your toes.
How good a manager was George Graham? In retrospect now, he kind of, in some ways, his career, we probably need to revise exactly where his standing was as a manager. Obviously, there was a whiff of scandal, and that might have diminished his standing in the eyes of a lot of people. But we've been talking a good bit on the show this morning about teams who do something for the first time in a long time deserve a whole heap of credit. And there's no way that Arsenal would have won those league titles and bridged the gap from the team in the early 70s if it hadn't been for the force of personality and the football nous of somebody like George Graham.
No, I think when he arrived at the club in '86, he saw a bit of a soft underbelly there, a team that wasn't going anywhere, and he had to change things and change them quite radically. And he introduced real steel to the side and determination. He always used to say, people think you're southern softies, let's go up there to one of the northern cities and show them we're not going to roll over. He was determined that we would be a tough team to beat, that we would stand up for ourselves. But tactically, he was excellent as well. Our success in Europe showed that. He switched from 4-4-2 on a Saturday in the league to 4-3-3 in the European Cup Winners' Cup. He just thought we were too open in midfield when we got knocked out of the European Cup in '91 by Benfica. And he worked hard on the tactical side of things. So he wasn't just a disciplinarian. He understood the nuts and bolts of the tactics. He knew exactly what he wanted.
Do you think he gets the credit he deserves for that period of time?
Well, maybe not. I think now it's beginning to come back. People are appreciating exactly what he did. That Arsene Wenger would have struggled to achieve what he did so quickly. Arsene obviously inherited that back four, back five, which gave him a great platform to go on and win the double in '98. We hadn't won the title in 18 years. And so in '89, when we did that, it was a turning point for the club. And it was the start of everything that came afterwards.
I guess as well, so many Arsenal supporters for so long in the Arsene Wenger thought success was going to be such a regular thing that they forgot there was a time actually that it didn't come as straightforward, that there was a time when the club needed to be rejuvenated and brought back to life like George Graham did. On 89, then, while we have you on and we're talking about that, and there's been obviously a lot of reminiscing about Liverpool and that 89-90 period. That night at Anfield, what's the standout memory for you of that night, away from the goal?
Good question. I suppose Mickey Thomas's goal, really, and the fact that one side clipped it through towards him. It was just, sounds a cliche, but it did seem to go into slow motion. All the lads say the same. We could all see him being closed down from left and right, red shirts converging, and we all thought Mickey was going to leave it too late. So when he eventually just clipped it over Grobler, I mean, that was the moment. We quickly went to Mickey and then went to the corner of the ground where our fans were, and it was just bedlam. Just the whole night was incredibly special. We all look back on it now with tremendous fondness, and just, we're just so honoured really to have been involved in a game of that magnitude. It seems to get bigger and bigger as you move away. We've made a film about it, and they've been showing it on the telly during lockdown, that match. So we're all very proud. It was an amazing night.
Is there stuff from the season that you remember, like signposts along the way, that you're thinking, actually, this is going to go our way, or this isn't going to go our way, or we're at least going to give ourselves a shot of winning this in the last second away from home on goal difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, leading up to Christmas, we were flying, hardly lost a game, and then afterwards we were dropping points, and then our last two games at home, Derby we lost, to them, 2-1. And then we drew with Wimbledon at home, and that's your last home game, and you always do a little lap of honour. And the feeling at Highbury that night was, well, we've given it a good try. Thanks for supporting us. And the fans were probably feeling the same way. We got a warm reception as we left the pitch, and in the dressing room that night, we were just deflated. I mean, we hadn't given up. The chairman came down, as he would do once a season, to say well done. But the gaffer, he said, listen, lads, we're still in this. We've made it hard for ourselves. But, I mean, we all left Highbury that night, drove back home feeling as if we've let this slip. But then when the maths became clear and we knew we had to win by 2 goals, I mean, we didn't immediately think, yeah, we're going to do that. But we thought we're still in with a shout. But, yeah, those last 2 home games were huge disappointments. We could have made life a bit easier for ourselves.
Your goal comes in the first half, is that right?
No, shortly into the second half, about 10 minutes in.
Okay, yeah, so at half-time it's still 0-0. What's that dressing room like?
Well, the lads were disappointed because we'd hardly had an effort on goal. Steve Bold had a header that got cleared off the line, but that was about it. And we're thinking we've got to score 2 goals here, and we can't really get into their box. Never mind a goal, but the gaffer was always about the clean sheet. He said, as long as we keep a clean sheet, we're in this, lads. If we can see, we've got to get 3 and it's all over. I know perfectly. He said, we'll push on a bit now. The 2 wing backs, as they were that night, Lee Dixon and Nigel Winterburn. He says, Nigel, I want you to push on a bit more, try and get some balls into the box, and we'll get that first goal. So the gaffer takes a lot of credit for really sending us out with a lot of belief.
Alan, great stuff, and thanks a million for joining us this morning and sharing your memories of Theo Foley, and I hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I hope, everyone will remember Theo, and I hope the club will do something as well. He deserves to be fondly remembered. He played a big part in the history of the club.
Alan Smith, always great to talk to you. Thanks a million, man. Cheers.
Thank you.
It's 8:47 here this morning, and it's Alan Smith giving us some reflections on an important time in Arsenal's history, and of course the role of Theo Foley. We want to send our best wishes to Theo's family as well. Now, if you want to get in touch with us this morning, 0879 180 180 is the number, or you can always use the hashtag OTB AM. We're going to be talking about Clare's Mount Rushmore a little bit later on with Jamesie O'Connor and Sil O'Connor. We're going to set the scene with Keith Wood in just a second. But just to wrap up that point about Arsenal, I think, look, again, it's kind of the theme of the morning. Teams who end a famine, and that's an excellent point. There would be no Arsene Wenger success if it hadn't been for George Graham, and because of the bungs and because of the suspension, that's kind of how his career is remembered, as opposed to being somebody who went toe-to-toe with Alex Ferguson and Kenny Dalglish.
Yeah, you do forget that there was an 18-year period where they didn't win the league because, it is the last 30 years of Arsenal been thereabouts up to maybe the last couple of seasons. So clearly they did something very, very right, and the base of that defence ended up being the base of Arsene Wenger's first defence that ended up winning the Premier League in '98. So he put in place a structure that was able to survive through that change from the old First Division into the Premier League. And you're right, listen, the controversy is always going to be what people think about, unfortunately, with George Graham. But there's no doubt he knew how to organise a football team, and a very good football team as well, because that was still at that stage a quality Liverpool side. Like that, again, that 89 match, you could speak for hours about it in the context, and a month after Hillsborough, and just the drama of how it all ended, and around the time of that all Merseyside FA Cup final.
Yeah,
it's insane, that period of English football.
Yeah, and I said goal difference. There wasn't even goal difference. I mean, obviously goals were important. I think it's goals scored, isn't it? They have the same goal difference, but Arsenal have more goals scored. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's why they needed to win by 2 goals to bring them level on goal difference. Unbelievable drama when you think about it. It's the Sergio Aguero goal and this are about, they're kind of parallel, but I always think of it might even be the same year. Greg LeMond wins the Tour de France by 7 seconds after 21 stages and 4,000 miles. And you're like, this can't happen. It's insane. It's just it's a slow motion sense of that Michael Thomas goal. Everybody can remember it. About 8 different things need to go in his favour. Ray Houghton knows he should have just clattered him. He should never have got near the penalty area. He should have just clattered him. But listen.
They say the same about Maradona's goal as well. It's 8:50 this morning. This Friday at 12 o'clock, we're going to be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in cold hard cash. It's our brand new game show, Know Your Football. I hosted this for the first time last Friday, and it was absolutely brilliant crack. It's 15 questions. We whittled down the number getting it right. We know exactly how many are still in with the shout of winning, and we had 4 people shared $2,000 last Friday, so we revert back to our weekly prize of $1,000. It's been reset after the $2,000 was split last week. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. You've got to get onto quiz.otbsports.com. But like 10 to 12 on Friday is the perfect time to do it. But join us from 11:30. We've got a half-hour build-up show to it as well, and it is very good fun. Keith Wood joins us next on OTB AM to set the scene for Clare's Mount Rushmore.
OTB's Mount Rushmore. 32 counties, 1 county representative choosing their sporting Mount Rushmore. Some decisions are easy.
I mean, it takes 2.5 days to read Johnny Murtaugh's Wikipedia. It goes on and on and on.
Others are controversial.
A colossus of a man. But should he go up on the side of a mountain? No, Tommy, no. I cannot have Graham Geraghty.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
It's very, very special, believe me. You can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though. Fortunately, inside me, that's ultra competitive, and I need to be there.
And catch the live decision-making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
Keith, the good people at World Rugby once deigned to make you the World Rugby Player of the Year, but what if your own people don't put you on their sporting Mount Rushmore?
I know, thank God I'm not picking the 4 anyway, that's for certain. And would I be upset? Do you know what, I'd get over it. But I've loved listening to this for the last few weeks, actually, and listening to the guys that have been left in and left out. It's kind of entertaining. And you know what? That little clip with Ronan O'Gara saying, yeah, we're all competitive. You're dead right, we're all competitive. You know, there's no way around that fact at all. It's kind of what made sports people in the first place.
Exactly, yeah. I'm going to breach a lot of confidences here, but I'm fairly sure that Ronan O'Gara was lobbying from before the actual day itself. So I don't know if you've been in touch with Still O'Connor and Jamesie O'Connor. I just want to, if you want to confess to it, that's fine. It appears as if that is the done thing.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I won't do that, though I do love Jamesie and everything he stands for. But no, I haven't been in contact whatsoever.
Is Clare?
I'd have a little bit of association with them, but that's about it.
Is Clare exclusively Hurling County, or it's not really? What kind of sporting county was it for you to grow up in?
I think it was a Hurling County. We had rugby, and we'll talk about that in a while, but for me, it was growing up in Killaloe. The first game I played, you watched anything on telly and you played whatever was on the telly. You know, there wasn't much on the telly. We only had the one channel, really. But you wanted to get out onto the hurling field, which was about 250 yards from my house. And it was just hurling. Now, it's funny, it's different to what kids do now, which is they do a huge amount of training. We did seem to do a huge amount of matches, and we played all the age levels. It didn't matter what age you were. You played about 6 years up anyway, because we were a small village and Smith O'Brien's was a small club. But it was pure, unadulterated hurling. And actually, we grew up with the idea that we hadn't won for years. So we were bitter. And there was that sense of, could it be our year? And it just didn't happen time after time after time. So our hearts were broken by hurling from a Clare perspective. But from a club perspective, we wouldn't have been a top-notch hurling club. We would have been intermediate at our senior level, and we would have been B, not A, in the championship in under 12s, 14s, 16s. But I loved it, and I have to still say, to this day, it's my favourite sport to have played in terms of the skill that was required. There's a kind of madness and a joy to hurling that Like, it's a crazy game, you know, and we played with no helmets, or helmets were only just coming in, but there were absolutely no face masks. And, you know, there was a touch of madness to it. And actually, when you start looking at some of the players that will go on Clare's Mount Rushmore, you're looking at a touch of madness as well.
Absolutely. Was Loughnane then the kind of... Because it's impossible for me to remember what it would have been like to watch Loughnane hurl on Clare teams that were good but not great, or not good enough to get over the great teams that they were going up against. Was he a totemic figure as a player as well as a manager?
Well, he was long before he was a manager, obviously. Himself and Sean Stack were the two players that I seem to dredge out of my memory from the 70s and early 80s, that they were the players that were you know, getting all-stars, but on teams that weren't winning anything, and were valiantly driving. And look, when I mentioned bitterness, I think it was an element of that bitterness for those players, that when they retired from playing, they brought that drive on to the next generation as well. And so they're the memories I have from it, actually, are valiantly losing, which is not a nice place to be.
Are you from Killaloe? Is that where your dad is from?
My dad was from Limerick. I was born in Ardnacrusha. I was born in Limerick, like most Clare people, but we lived on a farm in Ardnacrusha. In Clare, and we moved to Killaloe when I was 1. Right. So I know I'm a Killaloe man, and I'm definitely a Clare man. So Limerick Leader used to have a bit of a bitch and a moan about me at one stage that I'd abandoned Limerick, but no, I was a Clare man. So,
but your dad would have been, because I'm trying to establish what level of rugby there was in Clare. Your dad obviously played for the Lions, but he's a Limerick man.
Yeah, he's a Limerick man. Brendan Foley is a Limerick man, and we ended up having a couple of few internationals from Killaloe, and I think partly from the fact that our two dads had both played for Ireland. And actually, when the Foleys moved to Killaloe, and I don't know when that was, I think it was 79, 80, something like that. They moved into our house, lived on the top floor of our house when they were re-roofing their house, because our two dads knew each other. So I remember Foley as a 5-year-old kid, and we were friends from then on in, you know, but it was as much to do with their father as to do with anything else. And there was a new rugby club set up in Killaloe in 79, Ballina Killaloe, which is still going today, which is a very vibrant club. And so there was rugby. There was a bit of rugby. There was rugby in Ennis. Ennis is a proud club, but it wasn't common. Definitely not. Though we always had matches out here in Killaloe, but it wasn't all over Clare. Definitely not. Clare is mostly a hurling county. There's definitely football on the west side of it, but we played little or none actually in Killaloe.
Right, I didn't realise that you'd lived with Foley when you were kids. Pretty amazing that the two of you end up going on to play for Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was funny. We played hurling together all the way through. He's 2 years younger than me, but he was taller than I was. And it's funny, I'm looking at his son at the present moment in time. Tony He's a damn sight taller than I am now. I'd say he's taller than his own father at 15, but he's growing like a weed. So Anthony was this big, skinny kid. As a hurler, it was quite entertaining because it's very funny. People keep talking back about how great he was as a hurler. And actually, he grew into a very good hurler, and he really did. But there was about 2 or 3 years, it was as if there was a puppeteer playing with him because he was trying to grow into his body, and he'd do 3 things that were unbelievably magic, 3 things that were dreadful, and the rest kind of the norm. But he became a fantastic hurler, and strangely, it was his release, I think, from rugby up until he died. He couldn't think of anything better than bringing his kids down for hurling training, down to Smith O'Brien's, and he did a couple of days a week, every week, irrespective of what was going on.
Go on, sorry, Nathan.
Keith, we've been talking throughout the Mount Rushmore about people who get on the Mount Rushmore and who miss out, and quite often GAA players are in maybe a more fortunate position because they wear the colours of the county week in, week out, and therefore it's sort of singed into your brain that they represent you. Whereas when you think of Anthony Foley, you think of the red of Munster more than the Clare colours. In terms of him being from Clare and him deserving to be on this Mount Rushmore, what did it mean, his Clareness to him and being part of that Munster side?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is, if we're being honest, GAA is, I know Neil Francis said that rugby was becoming the main Irish game, and that was always rubbish. You know, GAA is, and if you're in a football county, it's football, and if you're in a hurling county, it's hurling. And for us, it would have marked us up as being Claremen. We were always Claremen. We wanted to play hurling for Clare. That was the drive that we had when we were hurling, and there was a sense of that part about him. Now, Anthony was born in Limerick. He spent the first few years of his life in Limerick, but I would have said he identified as being a Clareman in a huge way. And yes, you're a Munsterman, and yes, but I think GAA takes that supersedence in terms of county colours, because that's what you do. You play for your county. That isn't something that runs for rugby. So I don't know that you get kind of too bogged down in that. For Anthony, he would have been a very, very proud Clareman. He loved hurling. He played hurling underage for Clare. He never had the body for hurling, really. He might have had a window for it, same as myself, actually. And, I was fast, but I wasn't agile. And you suddenly learn that when you're 16 or 17, when people can spin on a sixpence and you're taking a sort of turning circle of an Arctic trawler. But, like Foley he knew where he was from. I think we were all proud of him for what he did, for A, playing for Ireland, which was pretty impressive, B, playing so many games for Munster, and I think bringing so many rural people around the province to follow him, not just from Clare. It made it very comfortable to follow country guys, and Munster is made up of a couple of big cities, but mostly country towns. And there's a link to everybody. So there was that level of, I would have said, everyman supporter around it. And I think that came on the back of a lot of the players that played from the country. We both went to the same school. We both went to St. Munchin's in Limerick. And that was a really good rugby school, but it was a rugby school that was built on principles of looking after the farmers from West Limerick. And latterly, in our time, it became a lot of the country folk from East Clare started going in. And if you look at it now, there's a huge amount from Clare going to St. Munchin's.
Were you guys boarders, or did you travel in and out every day?
I travelled in and out every day. Anthony boarders.
Right. And so that's like a half an hour commute every morning in and out of school?
Yeah. And look, I loved it. It was great. It was different. My brothers had gone there before me. It was very close to where we lived in Ardnacrusha. So when we lived in Ardnacrusha, it was very, very close. It's just over the border. And for me, then I never even thought of going anywhere else. As my own three sons, there was no consideration of them going anywhere else. They're all in Munchin's as well.
I think the point you make about the awakening of a fan base and how a fan base is kind of electrified by certain individuals. It's the same in some ways that Sean O'Brien opened up Leinster from beyond the enclave that it was in to a bit where, Shane Horgan, followed by Sean O'Brien, followed by Tadhg Furlong. And maybe in Munster you had that already in that there was more of a hodgepodge from the All Blacks team, but in the professional era you can kind of point to people like Foley.
Yeah, I think it was a harder sell in Leinster. I think it's an easier sell in Munster. And there was always a great link with the fans from rugby. He was with Shannon, I was with Gary Owen. There was a great link with those fans at that stage anyway, back in the early 90s. I do think that was part of it. Like, we use Munster as the province. Leinster, for a lot of the time, pretty much was just Dublin. Now, they never said that, they never meant that, but that was just the way it was taken. That's why we ended up getting a huge amount of supporters from Kilkenny, Carlow even. They'd say, they were kind of Leinster fans, if that makes
Leinsters,
sense.
Oh yeah, it was a big thing.
The Leinsters, yeah. I have a friend in Dublin. I call him Eddie Lunster. Still, he's in my phone as that, and I think he takes it okay still. But it's coming back to haunt us a little with Leinster doing so well.
Look, I've spoken like this before, but Leinster used to have banners up, D Fortress, and it was like, all right, fair enough. If that's your marketing tool, fair enough. But you should be aware of the fact that you're creating Leinsters all around the county. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I think it's important to have people to hang that hat on. And I guess that's the case for Foley, is that he was a brilliant player, a totemic figure as a leader, but also kind of has a wider context in uniting something bigger, which I think speaks to Nathan's point about the county colours. It's like he makes it okay for people in all across the county of Clare to stick their Munster jersey on, to feel proud of it.
Oh, I think so. I absolutely think so. And he held aloft the European Cup. Just can't get away from that fact. So that's it's one of those fantastic things. So, and I remember, I still remember him as a Clare man. I think some might call him a Limerick man, but I would remember him in Clare jerseys. You see, and that's the other thing. If you manage to play for your county and you have the colours on, you know exactly where you're from.
So he did play as an underage, did he?
Oh, he did, yeah.
Right.
And we actually played. We played on an East Clare team first, and I played. That was in 1988. We actually got to the Munster final. We played before the Cork-Waterford Munster final in '88. And he played in that, definitely. We got beaten by East Waterford by a couple of points, which really hurt me. I played for Clare. There was a combined Clare team then, the first ever Nina Milk quadrangular tournament they had in '88, which we'll talk about that in a minute too. And I think Foley played in that the following year, the year after. Look, pure Clare.
We haven't had a selector, correct me if I'm wrong, Gerard, we haven't had a selector select themselves on Mount Rushmore. And Jamesie, I'm sure, is going to be too modest a little bit later to put himself up on the Clare Mount Rushmore. But he's unquestionably on the shortlist for his brilliance in '95 and man of the match in the final in '97. Can you talk a bit about Jamesie, Keith, and the reverence he's held within Clare and your memories of him growing up? Because I think he played, was it under 16 together?
Yeah, we did. I mean, I look at Jamesie. Jamesie was from Durope Airfield. They were a serious team. There were a lot of serious players in Clare at the time, and we looked on them with envy. From Killaloe, we weren't getting much of a run, and we weren't at that A level with 6 Mile Bridge, Cranklow. So the first time I got to see Jamesie was playing against Limerick. I was centre forward, he was wing forward, and Rory Murphy from Cranklow was the other wing forward. It's one of those great things that I can look back at it to this day. And I was a reasonable hurler in that I wasn't very big. I was getting big at that stage, and suddenly. I was able to break the ball very well. I was a good point scorer, good from frees. And it was just like a different game playing beside him. There was just no comparison. So I was doing everything by huge amounts of effort. He was doing everything with no effort. And he'd a flick in his wrists that I still can't do without breaking something. And it's interesting when you look back when you're 16 years of age and you're playing beside someone who just does something so beyond anything of your capability. It's almost daunting and frightening to see it. But he was just a standout in that team, and he became the standout from every single game that went afterwards. And if I go back to Foley just for 1 minute, we came back from the World Cup in '95, and I had a bad injury and I had surgery, and Foley had been back as well. But we went to that final. We got tickets. We were in the Nally stand in the final in '97, the All-Ireland. We were the first to leave the ground. We didn't stay for the trophy because we rushed back to Killaloe to go mad in Killaloe. We want to be there for all the madness later on. But that was the dream for us. And we were looking at players that we'd played with. There was a lot of guys in that team that we'd played with 6 or 7 years previously. And it was, you still wanted to follow them everywhere. And Jamesie, for me, was the embodiment of that, because he had he had a winning mentality, and he had a sense of skills that was just, I think, different for an awful lot. And it was, I remember talking about O'Driscoll, that when O'Driscoll got the hat-trick in 2000, I remember saying with him on the team, you know, you weren't going to win every game, but nearly anything was possible. I have to say, I thought Jamesie was the same. That once he came along, there was a great team with him and a lot of really good players and a really good minor team that held together. A lot of those players held together. But with him on the field, you had an opportunity to win anything.
I think that when the ball's in his hand at the end of the 97 game and it's on the line, you don't actually feel like it's on the line because it's in Jamesie's hands. You know he's going to score. There was an absolute certainty that with this game apparently finely balanced, the right man, it was fate that the right man had it, and there was no opportunity for that to go anywhere except, yeah, no problems. Straight over, we're going to win this game. Now, obviously, there's a late chance for John Lahey, but it was like, you just, like, there was a certainty that I very rarely see in intercounty hurling or football where you just know that something is going to happen because somebody has reached such a high peak. And for me, that was the embodiment of the 97 team. I understand that Davy Fitz has criteria that see him in because he's a manager, and we can talk about that. But if you were picking, Keith, give me 3 names, will you? Because
look, I looked at a few. I think Foley, definitely. I think Jamesie. It's funny, I went for 4 names. Jamesie, O'Connor. I went for Davy Fitz, and I think Davy is, you know, half part mad and half part passionate, and they spill over into each other. I'm entertained by him. I asked him once, I said, "Why are you so mad, Davy?" And he absolutely raged at me, explaining why he wasn't mad, thus proving the fact that he was. But he's so passionate and he's such a winner. So I think having won as a player and winning as and becoming a coach and driving the teams on that have had little success, I just think he's done incredibly well. And I think you have to look at Kieran Fallon because, and it's funny, I have no real love or interest in racing and horse racing. But I ended up buying a horse at one stage with a couple of friends years and years ago. And honestly, anytime we stuck Kieran Fallon on it, he won. So I kind of liked him for that reason too, you know. And I think there are people who excel and succeed, and I think they need to get that. So for me, Foley, Jamesie, Kieran, and Davy.
Right.
That's me just throwing them out there.
Right,
you know?
So no Joe McNann, and obviously no Keith Wood on your own one. So this is a good list. That's all I'm going to say. This is a good list, and I don't envy the lads with their selections a little bit later on. Keith, we've got to go. We're out of time. Is there anything else, just from a Clare sporting perspective, that you think is important that we kind of make notice of or pay attention to? Because there's a strain of madness through all of those lads that you're. It's some level.
No, I think we're comfortably mad. I think that kind of fits the bill for all of us. Look, if we think madness, I go back to one of our coach under 16 for Clare was Mike McNamara from Scariff. And it was funny, he was an avid rugby guy, but he was our coach for the hurling, and his fitness trainings were to be seen, to be believed. And none of us complained about it. So we were comfortably mad, I think, with that. I mean, there's other players and other people, and we're trying to think of different people that have come through for a while. You've Anthony's sister, of course, Rosie. You have Emer Considine, who played Gaelic football, camogie for Clare, and obviously has played rugby. But no, I think I'm happy enough to stick with those 4.
That's not a bad list at all. Keith, great stuff this morning. Thanks a million for joining us.
Brilliant. Cheers, gents. All the best.
It's 15 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB AM. Plenty more to come. Obviously, we will be officially designating the 4 on Clare's Mount Rushmore in a little while. But maybe you've seen this over the last while. There's a group of us here in OTB Sports that are partnering with BMW and Triathlon Ireland to take part in the Run and Ride for Pieta, which is a cycle and run challenge. You're such filthy-minded people. Supporting Pieta House, and is proudly supported by BMW Ireland. We're halfway through our training schedule. The duathlon itself is taking place live on OTB AM on Friday the 17th of July. And I'm delighted to say that after the ads, we're going to be chatting to one of the star athletes of Triathlon Ireland, Doherty. Back in a moment.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. We were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
Yeah, so myself, Nathan, and a few other hardy souls have been doing the duathlon training, which is run, cycle and run, and we've found it relatively hard, I think it's fair to say, Nathan?
Well, I've had an injury crisis over the last few weeks, but I'm back. Calf pain has evaporated, thankfully, so I've managed to get a couple of runs in, getting back up towards my 5K pace again, and cycling I'm enjoying. I've a lot of questions for our expert today, though.
Yeah, I popped a groin at the weekend, so I'm definitely out of it for now. Con Doherty, I realise you're listening to this going, listen to those two snowflakes, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We had one of the Brownlee twins in studio last year, and it struck me that there's a strain of madness running through triathletes that other athletes have a little bit of, but you guys seem to be particularly crazy. What is it that draws you to trying to kill yourself in three separate disciplines, which actually, it turns out, are not very similar at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah, I was actually having a discussion with my good mates yesterday about this, and it's weird. Like, you look at the top guys in the world and the amount they do, they try to really replicate almost what an elite runner does. So they try and keep the mileage at the same that an elite runner does. The mileage that an elite cyclist does, maybe not a swimmer, but quite close. So, like, you know, you're talking like 40-hour training weeks. I don't really get it. I probably don't do the same quantity of training. I still do a lot, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just for, you love the variability, you love the change. You're not stuck with one thing, and I guess they obviously like to be alone, training for long periods of time.
What is your average kind of hours and training on a normal week, kind of, say, 4 or 5 weeks out from an event? What would you be doing? How do you taper that?
Yeah, I'm pretty, well, to be honest, year round, I'm pretty constant. So I'll train between 25 to 28 hours a week, between swim, bike, run, and gym and stuff like that. And there's probably up to 100 kilometers of running, about 400 k's of cycling, and maybe 20 to 25 kilometers of swimming. And then the rest is made up in strength and conditioning.
But if you're not one of the hardcore then, and you're doing 24 to 28 hours a week, what are the rest of them doing?
Well, look, I mean, I guess now with social media, you see everything that, you know, you always get like the best perspective of things. So maybe I'm wrong, you know, but the Norwegian guys who are they've burst onto the scene in the past couple of years, they're really sort of blown things out of the water like they do. I mean, up to 40-hour training weeks. From what we see, from what I can see, Jan Frodeno as well, the world Ironman champion. He's doing that sort of distance and time. Now, I guess that's a longer event. I'm still doing ITU stuff. But there's a few guys that are doing crazy numbers. Not everybody. I mean, I'd imagine majority are doing something similar to what I'm doing. But yeah, there's guys out there that are absolutely insane. Like if you were to try and like replicate the time on, say, a bike, if you're just cycling or if you're just swimming or if you're just running, I mean, it would be ridiculous, you know. So, but the good thing is with triathlon, I mean, you're in the swim, there's very little impact on the body, and it's mostly upper body orientated. And then the bike, it's not, again, you're not really creating any compact, you know, any problems with there. And then the run, if you just load manage, it's easier to do quite a lot. And I guess that's why we tend to do a lot. So
there was a time, Con, I'd imagine for triathletes and runners and swimmers, that you'd get to your event and you'd have no idea what your opponent had been doing. So there you turn up on the day and anything was possible. Whereas now we're using Strava and you're looking at the training that everyone else is doing. By the sounds of it, you're seeing what all your compatriots and competitors are doing.
And they're
as well.
faking it, clearly.
Well, is it hard mentally not to drive yourself demented that actually you have a training plan that works for you, but every time you go online, you see they're doing 10 hours more, and that may not be the right thing for you, but how do you get that balance?
Yeah, listen, you're on the ball there. I tell you that, because you're 100% right. Like when you go online, you have to be able to have the discipline to be like, all right, okay, what these guys are doing might not necessarily be what was best for me, and it's really, you know, I get fired up by what other people do, and I'm extremely competitive. So like when I see, say, the likes of like Christian Blumenfeld, one of the top guys, doing something like a 300k ride where he's averaging like 250 watts. Like I'm just like, I want to see if I can do that. But then you really have to assess whether or not you have to become scientific, really. You know, you have to realize what makes sense, what I'm doing making sense. And I think there's a difference between just training hard and smash your head against the wall and being smart. So I try to nowadays train as smart as possible because I've got that fire within to, you know, I'm not gonna struggle with motivation. It's a matter of like going in the right direction. So but you're 100% right. It's a matter of like dialing yourself back and not getting too absorbed in what you see online.
Well, on that then, because I haven't been sleeping well in the last couple of nights because I'm looking at Strava and I'm looking at Jared Gilroy's cycling times. And I, at the moment, am averaging, and this is embarrassing, I'm averaging about 22.8 kilometres for my cycle per hour. Jared's averaging about 26 kilometres.
I didn't even know that, Nathan. I didn't even know that.
I live, you know, right beside the mountain. So I'm probably, you know, my course is probably far tougher than his. His is probably half downhill. I don't know this. I haven't tried it out. But I do need to know, aside from the obvious, how do I cycle faster?
How do you cycle faster? I mean, it really depends. Like, your background matters. I assume both of you guys play soccer, am I right? Or?
I mean, not in about 20 years. Colin, nice of you to...
Okay, no, well, I mean, it does depend. Like, if you're somewhat active, but you're doing something like a field sport where you've got good short range power, you know, you've got good high end power. You might not have the best aerobic system, but you're strong. Then, I mean, it's a matter of your anaerobic is probably pretty good. So then it's a matter of getting out on the road and doing probably really long miles. And with that, obviously your weight drops, something that you don't want to obsess about, but like it's a fact, you know, the lighter you are while maintaining strength, you're going to go quicker.
You say your weight drops like it's a statement of fact, but there seems to be something not working for me with that at the moment, Con. I mean, I don't know what it is. It might be all the food. It might just be all the food.
Keep going. Do more, maybe. I don't know.
It seems so obvious, doesn't it? But I hadn't actually realised the difference it makes. But another triathlete got in touch with me online a couple of weeks ago, and I was, again, making the point of, I think, my 5K, how I can take a few seconds off it. And he went through per kilogram that it's about 15 seconds per kg that will come off your average kilometre.
Yeah.
Every kg you drop.
Well, it depends. So you're saying a kg, for every kg you lose, you go 15
now,
seconds.
Remember, we're starting at a very high level of
Yeah,
kg.
we got quite a bit of timber here to work with.
Yeah, I don't know if that's right.
What do you think?
I mean, there's a good video actually on YouTube, GCN. So they're called the Global Cycling Network, and they've got a YouTube channel, and they did a test actually where they compare like a really good bike, high-end bike, and a pretty low-grade, like €100 bike. So there was like a huge difference, you know, because bikes nowadays you're paying you can pay up to 10 grand for a road bike, and they measured the difference over a 2K uphill climb. So uphill is going to make much more of a difference your weight. And I think there was 12 seconds of a difference over a 2K, and there was maybe 2 kgs difference between the two bikes. So, I mean, on the flat, it's not going to matter too much, the weight thing. It'll make a little bit of a difference, and it's going to make, it is going to make a difference, but probably not as big as that. You know, the biggest gains you're going to see from being lighter on your run, where it's easier to maintain your form and to be, hold yourself upright. There's guys that are really big on the bike and they've got super power, and on the flat, I know guys that I wouldn't be able to stay with, and they might look fat, but they've got huge power on the flat. So it makes a difference, but not that big, I don't think.
Well, we can work on that. Can I have one last question for you? We did the triathlon as a relay last year, and I did the cycle, and Nathan did the run. We'd a couple of other people doing the swims as well. And afterwards, it was really amazing, because it was the first time it was the first time any of us, I think, had ever been involved in triathlon. And just to see the community afterwards and how big it was and how friendly it was and how much of a family atmosphere there was a really eye-opening thing for me as somebody who was kind of outside the sport and kind of my first introduction to it. Are you conscious of the fact that you're kind of a representative for all of those people as well, and that actually loads of people who are now casually running and casually swimming and casually cycling are coming towards the sport?
Yeah, I guess, when you do the sport, you're at this level, you're an ambassador, and it's not just, you have to watch out what you say and you do nowadays more than ever. But yeah, I think the sport is I grew up swimming, cycling and running, and I was competing at a high level as a kid in each of the sports, and it wasn't until maybe I think I was 14 when I decided what I wanted to do, 14, 15. And I've seen the environments of swimming, cycling, running, and not to put them down, but the variability that you have with triathlon, where you're not stuck inside in a pool all day. There's galas where, again, I don't want to put people down, but you're in a stuffy environment. It's not the best for interacting with people. With the triathlon, it's all outdoors. As you say, the community is really good. You get such a broad range of ages, from kids all the way up to, over 75 competing in the same race. And you wouldn't really have that in really any other events, maybe in a running race. So, I believe in the sport. I think it's great. I think it's a great sport, and I'll do everything I can to promote it. And I'm conscious of the fact that I have to maintain that image. Yeah.
Well, listen, best of luck with everything. Can people follow your progress on any social accounts?
Probably the best place is on Instagram. So _Doherty.
Nice one. We'll all sign up to it. Con, best of luck. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
It's Con Doherty, one of our elite triathletes there, advising us, I think, very, very gently to get out and do a bit more activity there, is what I heard from that. A reminder, of course, OTB Sports, delighted to be partnering with BMW and Triathlon Ireland as part of a group of us take part in the Run and Ride for Pieta, which is a cycle and run challenge that is supporting Pieta House and is proudly supported by BMW Ireland. 3 weeks into our training, you can still sign up and do the run with us right now on Triathlon Ireland. Mount Rushmore Clare is up next this morning on OTB AM with Jamesie O'Connor and Sil O'Connor. First, let's hear from Michael Verney talking about the club-county divide in the GAA at the moment.
I've heard all sorts and from very good sources of different counties and what's going on in counties. I know in one fairly predominant hurling county, the club managers have railed against the county manager, basically because the county manager is, organising his training sessions on one night, and then they're going to the club and maybe they can't train with the club. So the county managers or the club managers have come together within that county and basically put a roadblock up in front of the county manager. And there's very little the county manager can do there. He has all the club managers against him now, and he basically is going to have to play with those rules, I've heard. it's more than heard. It's very hard evidence that there's some county teams want their county players 4 nights a week to train for their intercounty football team, and the club is totally been left behind in that instance. And to get back to some sense of normality after this kind of unprecedented scenario we've been in, everybody just get back to your club. And you hear about people saying 98% of GAA players are club players. 100% of GAA players are club players. That's where they'll start. That's where they'll finish. They wouldn't be with their county were it not for the development and time that was put into them at club level. And are you telling me that, a county manager is going to have call over those guys coming up to big club games? It's ridiculous. We're gone back to, we haven't had any sort of normality in the last 3 months. Normality now is lads going back to their club, communities getting back to normal. Lads been able to go into the field maybe in the next month or two, watch young lads training, watch senior teams training. And it's so important that the county players are there within those clubs, driving it forward, not standing on the sideline because they've had a hard session with the county, illegally the night before. And I just think a harder line needs to be towed on this. There's so much ambiguity in it now. They're basically telling county managers, they're basically telling them to go and do whatever they want to do. And there's county teams training in golf courses. There's some county teams training across bogs, training in parks, doing all sorts of this crack. And the club is the part of it that's going to lose out as a result of it. And if you don't toe a hard line at it, and the GPA basically saying that county teams need to be insured before September the 14th, if they do go back, is kind of feeding into it as well, because basically saying, yes, they are back and they need to be insured, but they're not supposed to be back.
All right, it's Michael Verney there on Saturday, on the Saturday panel. You can subscribe to the Saturday panel podcast on the OTB Sports app. It's the best place to get all of our podcasts, and we'll ping you a little message anytime any of the ones that you subscribe to are updated. Right, it is time for Clare's Sporting Mount Rushmore.
You need to put a health warning with it.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore, live every weekday at 7:30 a.m. on OTB Sports Radio.
So you send out a fairly gentle tweet about trying to distill the 90s hurling team in Clare down to a couple of representatives, because obviously there are so many other brilliant sports representatives in Clare, and your Twitter is very busy for the next 24 hours or so afterwards. Kieran Fallon's getting a lot of mentions, Anthony Foley's getting a lot of mentions, Keith Wood's getting a lot of mentions, and then the hurling debate starts. And really, where the hell does that stop? Because there are so many, Shawnee McMahon, Jamesie, who's with us, Gerlach Nan, Davy, Dalo, that's just from that team. Then there's the team that wins in 2013 as well, and Davy's role and all that. So it is time for me to welcome our two guests this morning. We have Jamesie O'Connor, hurling legend, and Sil O'Connor, who is a broadcasting legend, both from Clare. Nathan is still with us as well. Sil, I might start with you. It's a grave responsibility we have thrust upon yourself and Jamesie. I hope you're taking it seriously.
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking about this. There was a competition ran in the county there recently to pick the best club team in your club. And even that generated controversy, even in the smallest of clubs. I can just imagine what this will do across the county, trying to pick the top 4 sports people in the county over a long period of time. It'll be interesting.
Jamesie, when you were growing up, were there other sports that you were interested in apart from being from a hurling mad family?
Absolutely, Ger. I mean, listen, you were a child in the 1970s or 80s, 2 television lands. So, you weren't blessed with options. But look at it. Yeah, we were out playing rugby when rugby season was on. We were jumping over barrels and hedges and walls when the show jumping was on in the RDS. Soccer, obviously the World Cup, the Olympics, they were all massive in our childhood. So, yeah, we watched everything, played everything. And yeah, life would have been a lot duller without sport, certainly through my childhood.
One of the things that's come up, and I kind of didn't realise Kieran Fallon was a real Clareman still. Is that something that the people of Clare have always known and have always kind of talked about?
I think maybe in latter years, maybe they would have copped on to that, because obviously he made his living most of the time in England. But the very fact that he's back now living in his native Clare, I think it has come to the fore an awful lot over the last period of time. So he'd be a serious contender up there with the top 4, I would believe.
All right. Nathan, from your perspective, obviously we had Keith Wood on a little bit earlier on. He kind of gave us the broad tapestry of exactly what the issues are when it comes to trying to establish Clare's credentials and who's there. And all of a sudden you start to look at it and it's like, it's pretty good.
Oh, the second you mentioned Dalo, I was thinking, how can you have a Clare Mount Rushmore without Dalo being up there? He has that perfect streak of madness and genius. But then so do so many of them. And it is that balance of Clare, such a wonderful hurling county. How many do you fit in when you've Keith Wood, World Rugby Player of the Year, Axel Foley, captained Munster to their first ever Heineken Cup, and then Kieran Fallon, who won, 3 derbies, 3 Oaks, 5 or 6 Guineas, arguably the greatest flat jockey of his era. So if the 3 of them were to get in, you'd be left with 1 hurler. I can't imagine a Clare Mount Rushmore with just 1 hurler, but then it's Jamesie, Dalo, Loughnane, Davy.
Yeah,
I don't envy Sil.
For a hurling county as well. Jamesie's our selector. Sil gets to make 1 change at the end, and then we come to some kind of consensus. Jamesie, where are you starting? What's safe territory to start? What's your safe space when it comes to this?
Yeah, well, I think, listen, rugby, part of this, Jarvis, is, I think the recipients have to be obviously a high profile, world class, exceptional. And I think the first guy that certainly ticks that box, and that's Keith Wood. Listen, obviously, 58 caps for Ireland, 10-year career, 15 tries. But when he broke onto the scene first, I mean, no hooker that I'd ever seen playing rugby had that same acceleration, that burst, that willingness to put his body on the line, with an obvious honesty. And, he revolutionised the position, I think. And I suppose, listen, that iconic Lions tour to South Africa in 1997, and I suppose the Living with Lions documentary, where we got to see behind the scenes, what went on, and you got a sense of how highly he was regarded, and I mean that was gripping stuff and had us all in our seats, and he was obviously an integral and central part to that, along with, I suppose, Paul Wallace and Jeremy Davison, I think, were the other guys that started. Look, he was World Rugby Year 2001. You look at the people that have won that list: Johnny Wilkinson, Dan Carter, Kieran Reid, Richie O'Brien, Sex obviously has won it. So, for me, absolutely world class. Keith Wood has to be on the list. And he played hurling for Clare as well, Ger. So, he has to be there. Now, for me, he edges out. Obviously Axel, and we know what he did in Cup. A massive and massively respected figure, within the whole Munster province, and what an integral part and central part and plank he was. When Munster again just brought us on what seemed like epic journey, year after year after year into the Heineken Cup. And again, like Woody, he's a Killaloe man. He's from I suppose a sporting family, a hurling family. I spoke to him a few years back, and I remember him saying that he was looking forward to going off for a few pubs with the boys when he got home, and he's just, I suppose, the respect that he's held within Munster tells you how important he was to them. And Martin was down the road in Clonlara as well. Over 60 caps for Ireland, over 200 appearances for Munster. Obviously a great success as part of the Ireland team at that era. So, those guys are all in the mix. But for me, Wood was absolutely world class, and he's the first name. And I think hopefully a fairly safe picture to start with.
I think it is a safe pick, Nathan, isn't it?
Yeah. Listen, I think you go through the list of other players who won World Player of the Year, and also you go through the list of players who haven't won World Player of the Year. So to get to that level, and there's been a few videos doing the rounds over the last few weeks of Keith's particular skill set with the ball in hand and his kicking ability. For a hooker, what he was able to do with the ball was exceptional. And again, you can become complacent about things like this when we have Keith on the show on such a regular basis as to just how brilliant he was. And to make that impact from hooker and to be World Player of the Year and to do it on a worldwide stage, I think thoroughly deserving of his place.
Sil, in terms of the Clareness was the kind of the topic that we were talking a little bit earlier on when we had Keith on about Foley in particular being the embodiment of Munster and holding aloft in that cool Munster jersey with the Toyota logo, the Heineken Cup. I suppose we're talking about Clare's Mount Rushmore. How Clare do the rugby players feel? Nathan makes the point that you see the hurlers and the footballers in the county colours in the various counties around Ireland, and that has been kind of shooing them onto the Mount in many ways. But I think sometimes we need to kind of think beyond that and think internationally.
Yeah, Ger, there's no question about it. When you come to a certain situation of any sports person in the county, you know, people might be not familiar or maybe not follow the sport that they're participating in, but when they reach the level that the likes of those players reach at Munster level, at Lions level, playing for Ireland and all that, that's when they generate huge interest within the county, no matter what their sporting abilities will be or what sport they participate in. So one of the things about that, and I have to say that you come into the world of rugby that we're talking about right now, and as Jamesie said, Marcus Horton just down the road, Axel Foley, you know, an absolute legend when it comes to rugby, and not alone here, but I think right across the world as well. There's no doubt about that. And I think when you talk there about the Keith Wood, you know, he's such a phenomenal player, and he was definitely on my list as one of the top 4 people that would have represented the county without a doubt. And I think he's looked very much upon as being a man from Clare, as James was saying, down the road. Don't know him personally, but I know an awful lot of people who would be very close friends with him. So I'm delighted that Keith Wood would have made James's top 4 because he's on mine as well.
All right, so there's a consensus there with Keith Wood. I think sometimes with players like that, again, you kind of forget that he bridges this era from the amateur to the professionalism and is part of injecting a level of professionalism that hadn't been there before in Irish rugby. So huge credit for that, and also for the game-changing abilities that you've talked about there as well, Jamesie. Before we get to hurling, what other sports are in the mix here, Jamesie, and who's next on your list?
Okay, next on the list is Kieran Fallon, a native of Crusheen, just out the road. But again, Joe, when you look at, when you talk about world class, I mean, this guy again ticks all the boxes. I mean, you know, you started the classics, 3 derbies. You know, John Magner, I think, was once asked what determines the racehorse or whatever, and I think he said the wooden plank or the finishing post at Epsom, and Fallon won the Derby 3 times. He won the Oaks 4 times. 5,000 guineas, 1,000 guineas. You go to Ireland then, the Irish Classics, 2 Irish Derbies, 3 Oaks, the St. Ledger. He was champion 6 times. He won the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe twice. He won the Breeders' Cup. He won the Arlington Million. Ascot was on a couple of weeks ago. He won the Gold Cup. He won the St. James's Palace Stakes in Nassau. All the big races there. The Coral Eclipse, the King George, the Locking, the Irish Champion Stakes. He won in Dubai, Hong Kong, France, Germany, Italy, Australia, the USA, and even the horses that he rode, you know, Yates, Northlight, Ouijabird, Bosrasham, Chris Kinn, Oath, Reims Averse, Hurricane Run, Dylan Thomas to win the Arc. He's ridden for Ballydoyle, obviously, and Aidan O'Brien. He was stable jockey for Henry Cecil, stable jockey for Sir Michael Stout. Okay, there's maybe been controversy in his career, and he's maybe had his demons, but Ger, in terms of all that, no one could deny his horsemanship, his nerve, his bravery, his sense of timing. I suppose all the things that are required, you know, to be an elite jockey and to have the pressure to come those horses in those Group 1 races, and you know the stakes that they're competing for. So, you know, it's a hard profession. I mean, to make 9 stone throughout your career is not easy. It's a tough life, and these guys are probably riding out 6-7 days a week, traveling all over the world. And you know, when you talk about world class and the greatest jockeys of all time, I mean, okay, he mightn't be the greatest jockey, you know, but certainly he's in that conversation. And you know, again, and again, it goes back, I think, Ger, to what we were saying about Keith and Axel and Marcus. You know, I don't think great athletes ever forget where they come from, or they don't ever. I think they always have that sense of place. I think Woody certainly has it, and Axel had it, and I'm sure Marcus has it, and I think Fallon has it as well. And for me, as I said, you know, to make this list, you had to be exceptional. You had to be massive if you compete on the international stage. And Fallon, no question, he ticks all those boxes. And he's not someone that people outside of Clare might, or even maybe people within Clare, you know, might have thought might have featured on this list. But for me, he absolutely has to be there.
Sale?
2 out of 2, Ger. 2 out of 2, because Kieran Fallon is also on my list. And, you know, an awful lot of people will be surprised that Kieran Fallon, I think, right now would be associated even with Clare. We've gone through all that. He's out and out Clare man. But I think the very fact that he probably spent the vast majority of not alone his career but his life, I would imagine, across the water, would surprise people maybe that he is from Clare. He's an out and out Clare man. James has outlined his success, and it's a phenomenal success. 6 times champion jockey as well, and that famous Arlington Million also participated in that and won it on one occasion in the States as well. So I'm delighted that Kieran Fallon is on it, an out and out sportsman, and certainly in the top 4, my top 4 in the county of Clare.
So this is obviously very difficult, right? But we've got to decide the relative merits of Kieran Fallon versus Anthony Foley versus other people as well. So are you both comfortable enough to have him ahead of Anthony Foley at this stage? Still, I might start with you. Are you comfortable that he edges? I don't have any rules. Do you have to have one rugby, one other sport, one blah, blah, blah? It's your mountain. You get to pick. So we're not stuck.
Look, Ger, I could list out 10 people just off the cuff outside of GAA circles that are contenders for the list. It's not a case of one rugby player and then we have to change it. It's not that. It's just that I just believe that Kieran Fallon, in the sport that he has excelled in, and he has excelled in that, a 6 times champion jockey in Britain, I think is a huge achievement. It's not taking from anybody else. And there's a vast majority of people on a list here that I was looking at over the last couple of days. And I don't think he's taking from anybody. I think he's outstanding in his own field. And that's how he made the top 4 for me in Clare, certainly not taking from anybody else.
OK, well, look, we might talk hurling at this point. Jamesie, you were part of the team that makes the breakthrough. And it's very difficult because for what it's worth, I don't know if you saw it earlier on, Keith Wood put you on his mountain as somebody who embodied that team in 95 and 97. So notwithstanding that, right, and I'm not asking you to put yourself on the mountain because I know you wouldn't, but you can if you want, by the way. Feel free, I'll back you 100%. I've got your back. How do you pick?
There's no need, Gerard, believe me, okay? I have no business anywhere near that mountain. I suppose, you look back at the history, I suppose, of Clare, and for my time, there were, outstanding, Clare players, from calling from the 60s. You go back to Jimmy Smith, I suppose, really is maybe the most well-known of those. I mean, 3 Harty, 3 All-Ireland colleges in a stellar career with St. Flannan's, when they were kind of starting to emerge as a force in the college scene. Played for Clare for, I suppose, the best part of 18 or 19 years. 6-4 Limerick 53 championship, I think, is a record that still stands and will probably never be beaten. 8 Railway Cup medals at a time, I suppose, in the Chrissy Ring era, when, I suppose, behind the Munster Championship in the All-Ireland, the Railway Cup was a massive prize, drawing massive crowds, and the regard, I think, with which he was held by his peers. He was chosen on the Munster team of the millennium, maybe the best ever team that players that never won All-Ireland. And an absolute stalwart for Clare, and I suppose won 5 county championships with his native Rouen as well. So Smith was a legend, I suppose, before my time. And then you've got the team, I suppose, in the 70s, with Sean Stack and Johnny Callan and obviously Seamus Jurek, Johnny McMahon and Colm Honan, and a lot of those guys, won All-Stars and obviously came desperately close. Particularly I think in 78, and I was only 6. I wasn't at it, but people still talk about that day and the 2-point defeat. To look at an exceptional, unbelievable, star-laden Cork team. So those guys have to be in the mix. And then I suppose you go to my era, and you start for me, Brian Lohan, Sean McMahon. If you're having conversations, Jared, about all-time greats and greatest players to ever play the position, I mean, Lohan is in the conversation at fullback, and Shawnee's in the conversation at centre back, and rightly so. And then outside of that, you've Dalo, captain of that side, an unbelievable character, an unbelievable captain, a phenomenal presence in the dressing room, a guy who went on to manage Clare, obviously managed Dublin, great success there. And he's in the mix. Davies, but then again, between the posts, manager in 2013. So yeah, this this isn't going to be easy. And Jerry, even just to digress, I mean, you could draw a line, and people maybe don't know this, and I know this has come up in some of the other ones, but you could draw a line down the middle of County Clare, and almost everything west of Ennis is football country. And you go back to West Clare, and Kilkee and Kilrush, and and up to North Clare, up to Listonbarn or whatever, to the Western Seaboard, Quilty, and there is no hurling played back there. Football is the game, and that's the reality of it. And then I suppose the east of the county, and the middle of the county, that's where the hurling is played, and they're where the traditional hurling strongholds are. So, it's not going to be easy to narrow this down. This is no easy task by any stretch of the imagination.
James, in terms of the 2013 team, are any of those players, probably because they're still playing, maybe they haven't yet, we haven't got to the point where they're finished, but are any of them in the mix? Is Tony Kelly in the mix?
To be honest with you, I don't think they are, because they're currently playing. I mean, you look at that team, and obviously Tony was young player of the year, and himself and Colin Galvin. I mean, the career that those guys had, David McInerney, supposed to throw into that as well, and I'm leaving out others. But to do what they did, I mean, they were exceptional, obviously, as minors. They carried that on and won the 321s. And obviously then, we thought in 2013, this is going to be, we're going to be competing in the Ireland semi-finals and Ireland finals and winning Munster, hopefully, for the foreseeable future. And it just didn't happen for whatever reason, I suppose. And look, obviously Kilkenny were still a force, and Tippett, that great team, and Brennan Maher, Pádraig Maher, Callan, Bonner, you keep going. Those players were in that era as well. So did they feature for me? I mean, I look back at that team, and obviously Tony and the guys I mentioned, Conrad for me was an absolutely class player, probably underrated. And maybe we didn't see the best of him either, maybe some of the style that we played during that time. Brendan Bugler was a classist for them. Pat Donlan, a great captain. And maybe I'm showing my bias, and maybe this is age bias. But no, I couldn't include those guys ahead of my contemporaries, my peers, in terms of maybe the longevity of their careers, the success, and maybe what they did, maybe even at club level. So, being honest about it, Ger, no, I wouldn't include them ahead of some of the names that I mentioned earlier.
Look, I think that's fair enough. And again, it goes back to the theme of the show today, is the team who does it first, I think, is the one that everybody else follows on from, and they stand on the shoulders of giants. Still, you've been covering these games, you've been at them all, you've commentated on them all, you know them all, you've seen them in club games. What's your take on how the hurling shakes down?
Well, Jerry, Jamesie there mentioned the likes of Jimmy Smith. I got an interest in the GAA back in the 60s when I was a young whippersnapper at the time. And I spent a lot of time listening to stories about the likes of Jimmy Smith, the likes of Matt Nugent, the likes of great players like that, from listening to my father telling stories. Then I came along to the 70s. And in the mid-70s, of course, the success of the Clare team of the 70s is without doubt for me one of the real highlights. And I'll tell you why. When you come across a county like Clare, like many other counties across the country, success is not that plentiful. But when it comes, it's looked upon as not alone a big achievement, which is fantastic, but it also becomes a huge occasion as well. It's a massive occasion. And I remember back in the 70s when Clare qualified for 3 league finals in particular. In 76, it was a drawn game, and they got a bit of a trimming in the replay. And then in 77 and 78, when they won 2 league titles in a row. That was a massive occasion for Clare as a hurling county, as a county right across the board. And when you have 30,000 people at a homecoming in the mid-70s for a National League title, it'll just give you some idea of what this success meant to the county of Clare. And those players are still, almost to this day, you could almost name those 15 players straight off the cuff for the success that they brought to the county of that. And I remember my very first time in Thurles in the early 70s. It was such an occasion to go to Thurles. Marty often talked about the...
Oh. Just lost still there, I think. That's unfortunate. We were getting to the bit where we were about to get to the decision.
What did Marty say?
I don't know. I don't know what he often said. Yeah,
I think Clare actually has turned out to be one of the most fascinating counties, because as we've gone around the country, there's a clear pride of place and parochialism towards people from every county, that anything that ever happened, it didn't matter. He's from here, so we want him on our Mount Rushmore. Whereas Clare is different. You look at two of their most iconic figures, Ger Loughnane and Davy Fitzgerald, and both of them are quite divisive within their own county. Are either of them totally beloved by everybody, or would you meet a good gang of people who would go, nah, not for me? There's something, maybe it is that touch of madness that is within Clare, that for some reason, like, both of those could well be on this Mount Rushmore.
Well, before we... Yeah, exactly. Before we go any further here, we want to bring in Irish Examiner columnist Kieran Shannon, who's a resident of Ballyea in County Clare, with this morning's last pitch after he picked his local Mount Rushmore, Tony Kelly, Tony Griffin, Gary Brennan and Micheál O'Hare. He brought us his one pick that he says has to be on Clare's Mount Rushmore. Have a look at this.
So for that last spot, there's a few people I think we have to consider. We mentioned Axel Foley. I think Rosie Foley is worthy of mention, who was one of the first generation of international rugby players and helped create a tradition and then a bit of a winning tradition and has swam the English Channel. Rosie's worth a mention, I think, along with Seamus Power. Look, is someone who, when I came to the county 15 years ago, was just routinely winning national cross-country championships. I mean, you know, I remember thinking at the time that whoever was the 14th or 15th highest profile player on the Clare team at the time, when they were about 3rd to 5th in the country in the mid-noughties, getting All-Ireland quarterfinals, semi-finals, still had a higher profile than Seamus Power. I remember thinking it was a scandal, because here is a guy who won multiple national cross-country championships, competed for Ireland a dozen times in the international cross-country championships, won a bronze medal in the European Championships. So, like, we all can run. Jamesie there is a great runner as well, but not quite a Seamus Power. And yet he was the guy who finished front of the line 9 times in the national cross-country championships. But look, when it comes to who has to be there, along with Loughnane, probably ahead of Loughnane, it has to be Michael Cusack. There's a reason why the county grounds are called what they are, Cusack Park. There's a reason why there's a statue in front of Cusack Park with Michael Cusack, because was he the best hurler? Well, he was the first hurler, and his achievement was to make sure there was a second hurler. And there's various, from Christy Rinnincock and DJ made the one in Kilkenny. There would be nobody on any county's Mount Rushmore if it wasn't for Michael Cusack. And for that reason, you know, some statues aren't looking very good at this moment in time in history, but Michael Cusack looks all the more. I would say that there should be a statue of Loughnane outside Cusack Park, but there should be Cusack beside Loughnane on the Clare Mount Rushmore. On these sort of things, we maybe don't give enough respect to the 19th century or early 20th century, but if you think of the Mount Rushmore in the States, it's guys going back to the 19th century. Michael Cusack made the GAA. He literally made the GAA. You can say whatever about him else, but it took a man with a bit of madness, maybe a bit like Loughnane. Loughnane might have channeled that spirit, but it was a man who remembered his boyhood in Clare. It wasn't anywhere else. He remembered his childhood in Kieran, and he said, this game is dying. That great game I played as a kid, and the gift he's given everybody, and he gave it to the whole country, but he particularly gave it to Clare, and for that reason, Michael Cusack, I think, joins your Mount Rushmore. It's a case of who's after that.
Right, compelling argument there from Kieran Shannon. The cat is amongst the pigeons, Jamesie O'Connor. Who are you picking third?
Yeah, third, I'm going with Brian Lohinger. Again, listen, like this was an almost impossible call to make, because the regard I have for you know, Shawnee and, you know, Fitzy and Dalo and all the other players in that team, but look, I made my championship debut with him in 1993. He was such an important figure in our dressing room, the iconic red helmet, and nobody seemed to galvanise the crowd more than Lohan. I mean, I remember we played Tip in the league game in I don't know, I think it might have been early '97 or whatever, and he blew one of the Tip players away with a shoulder or whatever, and won this ball he'd no right to win, and then just opened the shoulders and drove it, and the roof nearly came off the far stand over in Cusack Park, and he just seemed to be, I suppose, the one Clare player above all else that the Clare supporters revered. And look, at 4 All-Stars, you know, obviously the 2 All-Irelands and 3 Munster titles, 1 county championship, put with tones in his back, I suppose, and was instrumental in them getting to an All-Ireland club final. They won the Munster club. And for me, yeah, you had to pick maybe somebody from that era, and for me, I'm going with Brian Lohan.
Okay. Does that mean number 4 is going to be a shootout between the rest of that team, or are you leaning towards putting somebody from the west of the county on instead?
Yeah, well, again, Kieran obviously mentioned Seamus Power. I mean, 9 Ireland cross-country titles, whatever. Willie Keane from Kilkee, Ger Keane, the footballer that people might be familiar with. Willie Keane was I ranked Seamus Hayes during the week, whatever, just to get a bit of background. And he won something like 56 All-Ireland titles. There was that split, Ger, and I don't know the history behind it between the NACA and BLE back in the 70s whenever it happened. And he stayed maybe with the NACA or NACA Loyalty's roots in St. John's in Kilkee, whatever. But he was apparently an awesome, unbelievable athlete. Tim Smith, that the Fair Green in Ennis is named after, is Tim Smith Park, won the World Cross Country title in 1931. He's originally a native of Fecal or whatever. Won, I think, 10 Ireland Cross Country Championships, represented Ireland internationally. And then obviously you've got Seamus Power as well. Sonny Murphy, I think, ran the Olympics in 1932 in Los Angeles. Pat MacDonald was a native of Doonbeg. He went to America and won a gold medal in the shot put in Stockholm in 1912 and won another gold, I think, in 1920. So these guys are all in the mix as well. Ger, it comes down to the next one for me is between two, right? I could acknowledge, and growing up, obviously, I played football as well and played football in Flannan's, played minor football for Clare for about 15 minutes into their lives, how bad I was and got me off. But Noel Roach, when the compromise rules was been played in the 1980s, and I'm sure you watched it as well or whatever, Noel Roach was playing, and along with this, look at Spike Fagan, and there was maybe one or two others that were outside of the traditional, superpowers, the Kerrys, the Dublins, and so on. And that guy played compromise rules for Ireland on 4 consecutive occasions, like 84, 86, 87, and 1990. And he was just one of those quiet, unfussy players that obviously the managers of those sides, Kevin Heffernan, etc., had massive regard and respect for, because they wouldn't have picked him otherwise. And look, it gave a decade of service plus with Clare, and finally got his reward in 1992. He was cornerback in that team that defeated Kerry in the Munster Championship and finally brought back football silverware to Clare. So Noel Roach is definitely in the mix, ahead of guys like Seamus Clancy and Francis McInerney's in that team. I mean, Gary Brennan teaches with me in Flannan's, and Gary, has been a phenomenal servant of Clare football, over the last 10 years as well or whatever. But Ger, I couldn't conceive around much more of Clare without Loughnane being on it. And I've agonised over this, and I'm going to throw it back on Phil, and Phil can as a dirty job of unwriting or my wrongs, whatever perceived wrongs. And I know I may annoy the football side of the county by doing this, but for me, like, Loughnane was just exceptional. And I don't know if anybody could have got out of that team what he did, and what he had to do, to convince us to obviously, number one, get us physically ready, get the speed of our hurling up to what was required to compete with the Offaly's and the Limericks and the Kilkennys and the Tips and so on. But more than anything else, I think to change the mindset and convince us and transmit that belief to us that it could be done. And this is a guy who gave his heart and soul for Clare, suffered agonising, heartbreaking defeats in 5 Munster finals, and it was, obviously a mission for him, to finally get Clare over the line, and he managed to do that. And then when we won that Munster title, he wasn't prepared to settle for it. And a lot of other people would have been and been heroes forevermore. But you have to give him credit for getting us back to earth and driving on and going on to achieve the success that we did. So for me, it's Loughnane to complete the 4 ahead of Noel Roach, and hopefully, I think when you look at Lohan and Loughnane, I mean, I think you have exceptional there, along with Kieran Fallon and Keith Wood. Yeah, and as I said, Sil now has to go and fix it.
You do, but before we ask you to make the edit, will you talk to us a little bit about football and the '92, the impact that Munster title had on the people, particularly in the west of the county?
Well, I remember going. John Maughan obviously took over, I think, in 91. I played minor football for Clare, Jerry, in 89. And look, it wasn't in a good space. And I was underage in 1990 and didn't go for trials, had no interest, and didn't really want anything to do with it, to be honest with it, because that was that had been my experience. That we got to that Ireland minor final in '89. It was Mike Mack was involved, and it was really professional and well run and organised. And I played minor football for Clare because on the back of, but on a Fallon's team that won the Munster B colleges, I was playing cornerback, and I didn't train with that team once. I went down to the dressing room to play the first round of the championship against Waterford, was part of an extended panel, and then the team was called out, and I was named corner forward. And I was, how did this happen? What the hell is kind of going on here? You can't. I had no business being anywhere near that team. I wasn't good enough. And Maughan took over us in '91. Noel Walsh obviously got him on board, and I went to see Clare playing Kerry in Ennis in the Munster Championship in 1991, and they played phenomenally. And there was a guy called Mark Burke playing corner forward who was arguably the best player on the field. He was exceptional that day, and he subsequently tore his cruciate, I think, and missed out on the whole '92 thing. But the seeds were sown for that in '91, and I went to the Munster final in '92, reckoning that if they could have ran Kerry as close as the previous year, they had a chance. And I remember there were actually as many, I'd say, East Clare people there. I remember going in with my brother Christy. Shawnee, I think, was with us. I remember meeting Liam Doyle, Mousy Mack, who was sub-goalie in our panel in '97, behind the goal. And late in the second half, we were saying to ourselves, this is actually going to happen. They're actually going to win this. And it was phenomenal, because this was before the hurlers. The hurlers were in the doldrums at that stage. And obviously, it meant everything to the people of West Clare, where football is king, and that's their game, full stop. And it was phenomenal, and arguably gave a kick in the backside to the hurlers. They look at it, the footballers, and the training sessions and how hard they were working and how hard Maughan was running them were legendary. But that was maybe a wake-up call that, look at this, could be done, but look at, not without effort and not without putting your shoulder to the wheel. And maybe that had an impact on the players, and maybe had an impact on Lagnan and the subsequent hurling people as well.
I'm sure it did. Sil, will you make the case for the footballers for us?
I certainly will, because Jamesie has covered 92. The other thing you talk about in Clare, when people talk about Clare, they talk about the divide between, west of Clare is football and east of that is the hurling section. In 92, when Clare won the Munster football title on that occasion, they toured East Clare with the cup for many, many weeks after that, and it came to our own club in Six Mile Bridge as well. So it'll just show you it was a county success, as we keep talking about the county success. That's what it was. Huge occasion, and for many, many people, Ger, that was their first visit to Croke Park for the All-Ireland football semi-final against Dublin on that particular day. And we won't talk about the disallowed goal on that occasion that proved to be crucial at the end of the day. And the other big thing about it is, if Clare were in an All-Ireland final in the morning and in Croke Park, there's a certainty that the Artane band would play My Lovely Rose of Clare. On that particular occasion in 92, because of its association to West Clare, Percy French in his travels many, many years ago wrote a song about the West Clare Railway. Let's just say it would break down here. He wrote a song about that. And that's the song that was played in Croke Park in 1992 when the Clare footballers played in that All-Ireland football semi-final against Dublin. A massive occasion for Clare as a county. And as Jamesie said, it set us up nicely for 95 as well. Phenomenal success, some great players. And even to this day, there's some fantastic players. And, very few people have more admiration for in football circles at the moment than the Trojan work on the field of Gary Brennan and the Trojan work off the field of Colm Collins as manager.
So, and just on that, Chair, two of my club mates were on that 92 team. James Hannon was in goals, and Kieran O'Neill, who played hurling for Clare as well, was wing back. Seamus Clancy, obviously, and Colm Clancy, led those around the field in an intermediate final for Corofin, hurling final in I think 1991. Joe Considine was from Cura Clare. Joe played hurling in Flannan's. It was the first time he'd ever picked up a hurley, but he played underage for us because he was friendly with Christie and Ben Connery and a few of the other lads from Dory Bearfield, and transferred to us then as a nice letter player, and was an integral part of our All-Ireland winning club team in 1999. So there is that dual player aspect as well, and hurling and football been intertwined to an extent.
Yeah, I'm sure, and no doubt that you're right about the inspiration and the kick up the ass that it gave as well. Sil, just to recap the way this works for anybody who's joined us now, it's Jamesie makes us 4. We've had a case made for Michael Cusack by Kieran Shannon. Jamesie's 4 are Keith Wood, Kieran Fallon, Brian Lohan and Ger Loughnane. And the case made by Kieran Shannon for Michael Cusack was fairly strong. That's his 4. You get to edit that. You get to fix that. You get to make one change.
Okay.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
We're going with a 2 apiece with Kieran, Fallon and Keith Wood. I come on to my third choice. We're talking about Hurling and the market has left. I always talk about 77. I always talk about 95. I always talk about fantastic players. And there's one of them there right alongside us in Jamesie himself and all the players associated with that. But I think the one person for me that has not alone played a huge part in Clare Hurling, but has reshaped it as well for many, many years. Clare's first All-Star in the hurling field. And I have to go with Gilroy then as my third choice in this group of Rushmore 4. And my final choice would have to go to a man, if he didn't decide that he was going to do something to represent the country forever and a day. And I think his vision from a small house in Kieran back in 1884 at that very first meeting in Hayes' Hotel in Thurles, I think we wouldn't be talking about championship draws, league draws or anything else without the vision, I think, of Michael Cusack. I remember doing a sketch on him a number of years ago, and I think the mark that he has left as a Clareman on the country and many, many places around the world, I think the mark that Michael Cusack has left on the country as a whole cannot, for me, go without a serious mention. So right there, almost at the top of my list, I'd have to say would be Michael Cusack.
Does he not already have a statue? Is that not good enough for him?
There's a lot of people have statues. A lot of people are looking for statues. But I think Michael Cusack, I think, it's just, he just started. He got a vision. Just remember the times he set that up 136 years ago. The communication lines, just got a group of people together and decided that this organisation had merit, and look what it turned out to be.
Still, I don't know if you still do post-match interviews. If you're going to be down next time with Lohan after Clare winning All Ireland, and there's a massive controversy when Clare FM's interviewer is blanked by the All Ireland winning manager because you didn't stick him. You took him off. Worse than you didn't put him on. You took him off Mount Rushmore.
Listen to me, we used to call him Brian Lohan at all. We used to call him the fullback with the red helmet. And he always will be that, an absolute, like Jamesie and like many other players, a legend of the game. But take my word on it, Ger, Brian Lohan would have serious admiration for Michael Cusack as well.
Okay, the final 4, and this is it now. We can't go back on this. It's Keith Wood, Kieran Fallon, Gilroy and Michael Cusack. Jamesie, I felt like your team should have had 2 on it. The Michael Cusack thing has kind of put a wrench in it. Are you happy with that?
Listen, Ger, I mean, I haven't read the Hurlers, the book, but a friend of mine has said it's unbelievable, I suppose, in terms of just understanding, the times that they lived in, and obviously the vision that Cusack had and those people had. And as Sil said, look, the reality is that there mightn't be a game if these guys hadn't rescued it and did what they did in terms of rules and reviving it and so on. And apparently, like, hurling was on the verge of extinction. It wasn't being played, etc., etc., etc. And as I said, I'm looking forward to reading that book, Paul Rouse's book. But I don't think you can probably have any arguments, about Cusack and the role he played. I think the 4 people we picked here, I think, tick that box. And yeah, Brian Lohan could have been on it, and Shane McMahon could have been on it, and Noel Roach could have been on it, and I don't think that you could argue with their inclusion either. But yeah, I'm happy that Michael Cusack deserves his place there. He's someone, to be honest about it, that maybe wouldn't have entered my thought process initially. But when you think of the case that Kieran made and that Silas backed up, it's very, very hard to look beyond him.
It absolutely is. I presume this has gone on the Cliffs of Moher. Is that the only place for this?
Yeah, Cliffs of Moher would be. You can find a spot there. Yeah, good luck with it though.
We'll get planning if we ask the right people. Is there anywhere else? Is there anywhere else in Clare where it should be situated?
The statue of Michael Cusack?
No, the Mount Rushmore that we're going to chisel into some mountain in Clare somewhere.
That's interesting. Maybe Mount Callan, maybe on the way out to West Clare, might be a place to have a go at it, Ger. But I go over the cliffs.
Fair enough.
But Ger, if you're ever in Clare, Ger, Mullaghmore is a great walk in the burn. It's and it actually looks out on the house that they filmed Father Ted in. So maybe up there might be a fitting place for it.
12 o'clock hills, Abbey Hill, I'm being told to mention here.
Yes, just 12 o'clock hills. Just 5 minutes from me over the road, Ger. It would be more than welcome there, let me tell you.
This is just turned into an ad for the Wild Atlantic Way. And sure, it's a community service at this stage. Lads, it's been great. To the O'Connors, no relation, lads, it's been brilliant spending some time in your company, and thanks very much for the hard work of whittling that down to a brilliant forward. That is Clare's Mount Rushmore.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, Ger.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Right, we've gone way over this morning. It's 14 minutes past 8. One bit of breaking news for you, which is now up on the OTB Sports app. MTK have released a statement to The Athletic that Daniel Kinahan has stepped away from boxing, which, I don't know, is it that different from the stuff that they were saying? But the statement is, Daniel's going to be taking time away from the sport to focus on other interests, and hopefully this will put a stop to the negative press from Ireland that's based entirely on hearsay, says MTK Global President Bob Yalen. It's unfortunate for his fighters he's taking this step back, but I respect his personal decision. He wants to do what's right for the sport. He loves his fighters, but MTK will continue to secure the best, most lucrative deal for its fighters and ensure the biggest fights in the sports are made. We have lots of exciting news coming soon. So you can read a bit more of that this morning. Statement from MTK, given to The Athletic, not given to any Irish media organisation, which was interesting enough as it was. A fairly rambunctious conversation there about Clare's Mount Rushmore, only one of the team of the 90s, which I think defines what it means to be a Clare sports fan, makes it up there. And it's not even a member of the team, it's a member of it's obviously the manager.
Well, this is the constant debate. Kieran Fallon's greatness is not in doubt, but in terms of iconic Clare figures, is he ahead of a Brian Lohan or a Jamesie O'Connor or a Davy Fitzgerald? I'm not quite sure. It's hard to disagree with Michael Cusack. He literally created Ireland's greatest cultural institution. So, all right, it was 130 years ago, but I still think Michael Cusack, I don't think anyone, when you start thinking about it, it's hard to question him.
Yeah, I mean, it is. You left a guy off with 2 gold medals in the Olympics from your Mayo one, so look, buddy,
but you can't even remember his name, so clearly he wasn't that important.
Well, I mean, it's not my county. 087 918 180 to give us all of your abuse, and you can send your WhatsApp messages, only the clean ones, please. That is our lot for you this morning. OTB AM is with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10, and a little bit later sometimes if we feel it's good enough. You can get our best stuff on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in the App Store or in Google Play. We'll see you tomorrow. Best of luck.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports